There's a spacecraft buried in ice right now on a planet 40 light-years from Earth. A golden disk, 12 inches across, spinning slowly in the dark. The hull's ripped open, wiring exposed to frozen atmosphere, but inside the wreckage, something's still moving. The beings who found it don't recognize the metal alloy. They don't understand the phonograph mechanism or the diagrams etched into the surface. What they do recognize are the images, limbs, eyes, structures that look like cities, proof of something that built this and sent it here. They don't know its name is Voyager 1. They don't know it left a planet called Earth in 1977, carrying greetings in 55 languages and music from a species that hoped someone, someday, would find it. They don't know it was never supposed to land anywhere. What nobody knew at the time was that this wreck had been falling toward their planet for decades, and Earth had no idea it was gone. Voyager 1 launched from Cape Canaveral on September 5, 1977. Weight: 1,592 pounds. Power source: 3 radioisotope thermoelectric generators producing 470 watts. Mission profile: fly past Jupiter in 1979, past Saturn in 1980, then continue outward forever. Bolted to its side was the Golden Record, a copper disc coated in gold, carrying 116 images, 90 minutes of music, and recorded greetings. Carl Sagan's team encoded the position of our Sun relative to 14 pulsars, a map any spacefaring civilization could theoretically read. It was a message in a bottle thrown into an ocean 100,000 light-years across. The record included Bach, Beethoven, Chuck Berry. It included a mother's first words to her newborn child, diagrams of human anatomy, DNA structure, mathematical constants. It was designed to outlast our civilization, drifting silent and intact for billions of years. But Voyager's journey wasn't supposed to end on a planet at all. The trajectory was elegant. After Saturn, Voyager 1 would climb above the plane of the solar system at 38,000 miles per hour, pushed by Saturn's gravity into interstellar space. No planets ahead, no stars within 40,000 years, just cold, empty dark. Engineers calculated it would cross the heliopause, the boundary where the Sun's influence ends, sometime around 2012. After that, true interstellar space. The nearest star system, Gliese 445, wouldn't come within 1.6 light-years of Voyager's path for another 40,000 years. The design reflected that destiny. No heat shield for atmospheric entry, no landing gear, no systems for dealing with gravity stronger than micronewtons. Voyager was built to drift, not to descend. What changed that course was something engineers never accounted for. In 2024, 47 years after launch, Voyager 1 crossed into a region of space 15.3 billion miles from Earth. The Deep Space Network had already detected unusual telemetry, frequency shifts that didn't match any known stellar drift. Then the signal stuttered. A rogue planet, 3 times Jupiter's mass, drifting unbound between stars at 67,000 miles per hour. No reflected light, no radio signature. Voyager's optical sensors weren't designed to see it. The gravitational gradient hit the probe like a wave, torquing the antenna 14 degrees off axis in under 2 minutes. The hydrazine thrusters fired automatically, burning through 18% of remaining fuel trying to stabilize. One of the magnetometer booms bent 6 degrees, snapping its calibration. The power systems held. The Golden Record, bolted to the side, took a micrometeoroid impact from debris trailing the rogue world. The collision didn't destroy Voyager instantly, but it set the probe on a new path no one on Earth could track. The last confirmed signal from Voyager 1 reached the Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex at 0314 UTC on September 12, 2024. Engineers waited 22 hours for the next scheduled transmission. Nothing. They retasked the 70-meter dish, swept the expected coordinates, static. Mission controllers ran diagnostics on the ground systems first, all nominal. They checked the probe's predicted position based on 47 years of trajectory data. Still nothing. The official determination took 6 weeks. Transmitter failure, cause unknown but expected given the spacecraft's age. JPL issued a press release on October 29th. Voyager 1, humanity's farthest envoy, had gone silent after 47 years, 2 months, and 17 days of continuous operation. The mission was declared complete. Engineers archived the final telemetry packet, 183 kilobits of data, showing all systems within normal parameters. They had no way of knowing the probe was still intact, still moving, and headed somewhere it was never meant to go. Voyager tumbled through the void for 11 years. The rogue planet's gravity had added 23,400 miles per hour to its velocity and bent its trajectory 41 degrees. The probe spun end over end, one rotation every 7.3 hours. Solar panels faced away from the sun 68% of the time, but the RTG kept the core systems alive on 219 watts. In 2035, it crossed the heliopause of a red dwarf star 4.7 light-years from Earth, catalogued in terrestrial databases as WISE J07207 20W0846512. The star was 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than our Sun, barely luminous enough to register on infrared surveys. Voyager's trajectory arced toward the inner system, locked by gravitational capture. One planet orbited in the habitable zone, 0.03 AU from the star. Tidal locked, one face in permanent twilight, the other frozen dark. The probe's path would bring it within 840,000 miles of the surface in 16 months, close enough for atmosphere to matter. That planet had been watching the stars for centuries, and they were about to notice something new. The planet orbited a red dwarf 47 light-years from Earth, locked in place like a hand on a clock that stopped millions of years ago. One hemisphere baked under permanent daylight, the other froze in endless night. Life clung to the terminator zone, that narrow ring where temperatures allowed liquid water and the sky hung in perpetual twilight. The beings there evolved under a sun that never moved. Their astronomy wasn't about tracking motion, it was about cataloging fixed points. Stars didn't rise or set, planets didn't wander. The cosmos was a photograph, unchanging across generations. That stability bred something humans never developed, a cultural terror of anything that moved in the heavens. Their oldest myths spoke of wandering lights as omens of catastrophe, because on their world, nothing in the sky ever wandered. Their telescopes were built not to explore, but to confirm that everything remained where it had always been. For them, the appearance of a new object in their sky wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The observatory network picked it up 11 months before closest approach, a point of light where no point of light had been, moving at 38,000 miles per hour relative to their star. Initial spectroscopy showed metallic signatures, aluminum, titanium, traces of uranium-238. Within 48 hours, every major research facility on the Terminator had confirmed it. The object measured roughly 10 meters across, tumbling slowly, radiating heat, consistent with decades of solar exposure. Its trajectory was hyperbolic, not bound to their star, and the velocity ruled out natural capture from interstellar space. 3 competing models emerged. One team calculated it originated from a system 12 parsecs spinward. Another traced the ballistics back 40,000 years to a different vector entirely. A third pointed out that the craft's composition matched none of the stellar metallicity patterns in their stellar catalogue. What every model agreed on, this thing was built. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. The Council of Observers convened within 72 hours of confirmation. 14 senior researchers, 6 military advisors, 2 historians specializing in pre-scientific mythology. The recordings from that session, later translated, show a species confronting its oldest fear in real time. The probe hypothesis had evidence, deliberate construction, controlled tumble rate, trajectory that suggested a long journey. But the weapon hypothesis had history. Their mythology was full of sky objects that brought fire, and their own early attempts at rocketry had ended in disasters that shaped 3 generations of policy. To them, anything that moved through space at speed was a potential kinetic impactor. One faction wanted to use ground-based lasers to nudge it off course. Another proposed a rendezvous mission to investigate before it entered the gravity well. A third, smaller group argued for a communications attempt, broadcasting prime numbers and mathematical constants toward the object's projected path. The debate lasted 9 days. The object closed another 120,000 miles while they argued. The decision they made next would determine whether Voyager ever reached the surface intact. They voted to intervene. A gravitational deflection subtle enough to avoid shattering the object, but strong enough to alter its trajectory by 0.3 degrees. The burn lasted 47 seconds. Voyager 1 hit the upper atmosphere at 14.2 kilometers per second. Without a heat shield, the outer casing began ablating immediately. Temperatures reached 3,400 degrees Fahrenheit in the first 8 seconds. The antenna tore away at 87 kilometers altitude. The power unit separated at 64 kilometers. The thruster assembly disintegrated at 41 kilometers, scattering metal fragments across 200 square kilometers of frozen tundra. Atmospheric drag slowed the remaining mass to terminal velocity. What was left tumbled end over end through the thickening air, shedding components with each rotation. But the core module, the part carrying the golden record, survived the fall. Impact occurred at 0417 local time in a glacial valley 340 kilometers south of the nearest settlement. The module hit ice at 187 meters per second and punched through 31 meters before friction stopped it. The shock wave registered 2.1 on seismic instruments 600 kilometers away. Automated stations flagged the event as an anomaly, non-volcanic, point source. 3 separate observatories triangulated the coordinates within 90 minutes. Military sensors detected the atmospheric entry. Civilian astronomers had tracked the object for days. Now both groups knew exactly where it had landed, and neither knew what the other would do next. The crash site sat in disputed territory, technically under scientific protection treaties, but patrolled by 2 rival factions. A 14-person committee convened by encrypted relay before dawn. Within hours, the first expedition was already being assembled. The team reached the valley 39 hours after impact. 6 scientists, 4 military observers, 3 structural engineers, and 2 linguists, none of whom had been told why linguists were necessary. They traveled by ground transport to avoid aerial detection. The wreckage field stretched 1.7 kilometers. Twisted metal fragments lay half buried in snow, some still warm enough to melt shallow depressions. The main impact crater was 9 meters wide, surrounded by radial cracks in the ice. They drilled for 11 hours to reach the core module. When they finally cleared the ice around it, no one spoke for 23 seconds. The object was scorched, dented, partially crushed, but unmistakably manufactured. Unmistakably not from this world. One side of the casing had split open during impact. Through the gap, they could see something circular, metallic, etched with markings. A senior xenobiologist requested gloves and a sterile container. What they pulled from the ice would change their understanding of the universe forever. The disk was 30 centimeters across, gold-plated copper, heavier than it looked. Its surface was covered in geometric symbols, diagrams of circles and lines, instructions etched in a visual language no one in the room recognized. The protective aluminum casing had held, sealed tight for however many centuries it had drifted through the void. Material analysis came back inconclusive. The alloy wasn't in their databases. The manufacturing precision was crude by their standards, almost primitive, but the disk itself was flawless. No oxidation, no degradation. Whatever civilization built this understood one thing perfectly: How to make something last. One of the diagrams showed a circular object with a stylus, a spiral groove, rotational indicators, a storage medium, clearly, but the method was analog, mechanical, nothing like their quantum lattice archives. They had the data, locked in microscopic grooves, but no way to extract it. The real mystery wasn't what was on the record, it was whether they could even play it. The engineering team worked in 18-hour shifts, translating symbols into mechanics. The cover diagram showed rotational speed, 16.66 revolutions per minute, a precise number that suggested intentional design. They fabricated a spindle mount, a tracking arm, a stylus carved from industrial diamond, because nothing softer would hold the groove without damaging it. 22 days into the project, they had a working prototype. It looked absurd, a mechanical contraption in a lab filled with quantum processors, but the physics checked out. The groove depth, the stylus angle, the playback speed, everything aligned with the diagrams. They mounted the disc, lowered the arm, and watched the stylus make contact. Static filled the room first, then a hiss, then something underneath the noise. A waveform, modulated, structured, deliberate. The audio technician boosted the signal, filtered the interference, and suddenly, the room went silent. The first sound they heard from the record wasn't music. It was a human voice saying hello. 55 voices, one after another, each speaking in a different cadence, a different rhythm. The phonetics were alien, but the intent was transparent. Rising tones, soft inflections, the universal pattern of a greeting. Sumerian, Wu, Welsh, Urdu, languages separated by continents and millennia, all preserved in a single spiral groove. The linguistics team recorded everything, ran spectral analysis on every syllable, vocal cord structure, breath control, emotional resonance. These weren't synthesized. They were biological, organic, spoken by living beings. The tonal variation alone told a story. Dozens of distinct populations, all contributing to this one artifact. One linguist noticed something in the 12th greeting, a slight distortion in the waveform, a background sound, someone coughing, a chair scraping. The imperfections made it real. These weren't gods or abstractions. They were people, nervous, excited, recording messages for whoever might listen. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The greetings weren't the most disturbing part. The next track was wind, not synthesized, not engineered. Actual wind moving through trees on Earth. They played it through the lab's audio system, and the room went quiet. Thunder followed, then rain on pavement. A heartbeat, steady and slow, recorded inside a human chest. The sound of a mother kissing her child, brief and impossibly intimate. One of the linguists, a specialist in acoustic data, realized what they were hearing. This wasn't a greeting, it was a catalogue of a living planet. Every sound chosen to say, we exist, we breathe, we feel. They cycled through footsteps, laughter, a crackling fire, the rush of surf against a shore. 27 sounds in total, each one ordinary to the species that sent them. Each one proof of a world that was still turning when the probe was launched. Then they reached the section that made them question whether this was a gift or a warning. The music started with a Bach prelude. Precise, mathematical, built from patterns the alien engineers could decode structurally before they understood it emotionally. Then, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, explosive and deliberate. They didn't have the context to know what a string quartet was, or why a harpsichord sounded different from a shakuhachi flute, but they understood repetition, theme, variation. These sounds weren't random. They were arranged, composed, performed. Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Goode played next, and one of the younger researchers described it later as hearing organized chaos, electric, rhythmic, built to make a body move. 90 minutes of music in total, spanning centuries and continents, selected by a committee of humans who believed music was universal. The alien team recorded biometric data from everyone in the room while the music played. Pulse rates shifted, skin temperature changed. Whatever this species was, they had built something that could affect biology across star systems. Now, they could have stopped there. They didn't. The visual data was encoded as analog waveforms, 116 images compressed onto a gold-plated copper disk, spinning at 16.66 revolutions per minute. The decoding instructions were etched right on the surface. It took the engineers 11 hours to build the playback equipment. The first image resolved on their display screen at 0347 local time, a circle, calibration marks, and a diagram showing the hyperfine transition of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. The second image was an illustration of DNA's double helix structure with measurements. Then the anatomical drawing started. A human fetus in the womb, curled and translucent. A silhouette of a man and woman standing side by side, with height markers. Internal organs, skeletal structure, a diagram of human reproduction from conception to birth. The senior xenobiologist on the team flagged the sequence immediately. These weren't abstract concepts or mathematical proofs. They were blueprints. Whoever sent this probe had included a technical manual for building one of their own species. The images that followed would force them to confront a truth their civilization had spent centuries denying. The first photograph showed a single figure. Bipedal, yes. 2 arms, 2 legs. But the proportions were wrong. The skin was smooth, not scaled. No secondary respiratory vents. No thermal ridges along the spine. The second image showed 2 figures side by side, clearly different variants of the same species. Sexual dimorphism, the biologists noted. Like their own ancestors, 400 million years ago, before the glaciation rewrote everything. Then came the family. Adults flanking smaller versions of themselves. Offspring that stayed with parents long after hatching. A third image showed juveniles in motion, limbs flailing, faces contorted in what the xenopsychologists could only guess was joy. These weren't schematics, these were portraits. Whoever built Voyager 1 wanted to be seen, wanted to be known. The photograph that caused the most panic wasn't of humans, it was of Earth itself. The sphere hung against black space, half lit by its star. Blue, not the pale blue of distant ice fields, but deep, liquid blue. 71% of the surface was water in its fluid state. The temperature readings embedded in the record confirmed it. 288 Kelvin average, 15 degrees Celsius. Their own world hadn't seen liquid surface water in 3 epochs. Every biology text, every atmospheric model, every theorem about planetary evolution assumed one truth. Habitable worlds were cold. Life emerged in the ice, metabolized through thermal vents, evolved in the dark. But this planet blazed with color. Green continents, not white. Swirling white clouds, not frozen methane hazes. The atmospheric composition was printed beside the image. 21% oxygen, free oxygen, produced by something. The astrophysicists checked the calculations 11 times. The orbital radius, the stellar class, the greenhouse balance. It worked. A star could sit 150 million kilometers away and sustain liquid water. Everything they'd modeled about the cosmos was built on a sample size of 1. This is where their understanding of the cosmos began to fracture. The next images weren't landscapes, they were structures. A white dome with 4 towers, its base reflected in still water. A wall snaking across mountains for 21,196 kilometers stone blocks, fitted so precisely no mortar was needed, stacked 60 meters high. Their own cities were carved downward into bedrock, insulated bunkers clustered around geothermal shafts. The largest spanned 40 kilometers. These beings built upward, outward, across. One image showed a grid of light stretching 100 kilometers in every direction. A single settlement. The engineers studied the construction methods, load-bearing arches, cantilevered towers, materials exposed to open atmosphere for centuries without degradation. The energy budget required to heat these spaces, to move supplies across these distances, to coordinate labor on this scale. These weren't survival structures, they were monuments, built not because they had to, but because they could. The resource surplus implied by a single image, the Taj Mahal at sunset, exceeded their civilization's entire annual output. But the image that terrified their military wasn't of a monument, it was of a launch. The record held 116 images. 12 of them showed rockets, Saturn V on the pad, engines igniting, a Titan II lifting a Gemini capsule, an astronaut floating in the void, tethered to nothing but a thin line. Each frame documented a species that had escaped its own gravity well. Their own space program had managed 3 suborbital flights in 80 years. The chemical rockets shown in the images dwarfed their largest structures. The fuel requirements alone suggested an industrial base orders of magnitude beyond their own. If these beings had sent one probe across interstellar space, they could send 1,000. If they'd reached their own moon in the 1960s, what had they built in the decades since? The military analysts ran projections. Every scenario ended the same way. The question that divided their world wasn't whether to respond, it was whether responding would reveal their location. The crash site became a military zone within 6 hours of the initial landing. Perimeter fences went up 2 kilometers out. Air traffic was diverted. The 43 scientists who'd examined the probe were relocated to a research facility 400 kilometers inland, their communications monitored. The official statement called it an object of unknown origin under investigation. No mention of the record, no mention of the images, no mention of the beings who'd sent it. Journalists who pressed for details found their questions unanswered. Their requests for interviews declined. The science team was forbidden from publishing. Their notes were classified. Even their families were told only that they were working on a sensitive government project. For 3 months, the secret held. The cover-up might have worked, if it weren't for one astronomer who refused to stay silent. Dr. Kellness had copied 14 images to a small data chip before the military arrived. The Taj Mahal, Earth from space, a page of Newton's Principia, a rocket launch. She contacted a journalist at one of the planet's largest news networks and handed over the files. The story broke 48 hours later. Within a day, it had spread to every major city. The images were republished, analyzed, shared millions of times. Amateur astronomers began scanning the coordinates from the expedition's initial reports. Religious leaders called emergency assemblies. The government issued denials, then threats, then arrested Dr. Kellness on charges of treason. It didn't matter. The images were already everywhere. The being in the spacesuit, the blue planet, the architecture that spoke of abundance. The public reaction wasn't wonder, it was fear. Within hours, the images leaked beyond the quarantine facility. Networks broadcast the anatomical diagrams. Street projectors displayed the human faces. By morning, 6 billion beings had seen the contents of the golden record. Protests erupted in 47 major cities. Religious councils declared the record a blasphemy, proof of contamination from beyond. Crowds demanded it be melted down, erased, buried in the deepest ocean trench. Scientists formed blockades around the facility, insisting it was the most significant artifact in their history. The debate wasn't academic anymore. Security forces dispersed demonstrations with kinetic barriers. 3 researchers were hospitalized. A theologian set himself on fire outside the Parliament building, screaming that the visitors had come to harvest them. Governments froze. No official statement, no press conference. Just emergency sessions behind closed doors and encrypted channels going dark. What nobody realized yet was that the record contained a map, and it pointed directly to Earth. An astronomer noticed it first. The diagram etched into the record's cover wasn't decorative. 14 lines radiating from a central point, each marked with a binary sequence. She'd seen that pattern before in her own star charts. Pulsars, rotating neutron stars that sweep the galaxy with precise radio beams, cosmic lighthouses with frequencies that don't change. The diagram showed 14 of them, their periods encoded in the lines. It was a triangulation grid. Her team ran the numbers for 11 days. They cross-referenced pulsar catalogs, mapped decay rates backward, compensated for galactic rotation. The precision was terrifying. The map didn't show a region, it showed a star, a single yellow dwarf 41 light-years away. They found the planet 6 hours later. Third orbit. Liquid water signature. Oxygen atmosphere. The probe hadn't drifted here by accident or been sent blindly into the void. It was a message in a bottle, and the bottle had a return address. The discovery of Earth's location triggered a debate that would split their civilization in two. The silencers formed first. Military analysts, xenobiologists, historians who'd studied extinction events. Their argument was simple. Any species capable of interstellar travel 40 years ago would be unimaginably advanced now. Responding meant painting a target on their world. They pointed to the record itself as evidence. The humans had sent greetings in 55 languages, included coordinates to their homeworld, shown images of their cities and technology. Either staggering naivete or a supremely confident civilization that feared nothing. Neither interpretation was comforting. The ambassadors pushed back. Linguists, philosophers, engineers who'd spent months studying the music and mathematics. They saw the record as an outstretched hand, not a threat. The humans had included whale songs, a mother's kiss, children's laughter. Predators didn't send poetry. But the ambassadors couldn't answer the hard question. If we respond, what happens when they arrive? Delegations fractured, alliances collapsed. 3 governments fell in as many months. Polling showed the planet split 49% to 51%, the margin fluctuating daily. The decision came down to a single vote in their planetary council, and the outcome would determine the fate of 2 worlds. The vote happened at 0300 local time, broadcast live to 4.7 billion viewers, 612 council members present. The motion passed 307 to 305. Within 6 hours, engineers at their largest radio facility began encoding the transmission, a sequence of primes from 2 to 541, a proof of the Pythagorean theorem in binary, an image of their world, 480 by 640 pixels, showing blue oceans and green land masses. The message would travel at light speed toward Sol, 37.8 light-years distant. Arrival estimate, late 2047. They built redundancy into the signal, repeating the sequence every 14 minutes for 72 hours straight. Celebrations erupted in 83 cities. The transmitter arrays locked onto Earth's coordinates and fired. What they didn't know was that Earth's ability to detect their signal had already been compromised. The broadcast left their homeworld on March 19, 2043, carrying 1.4 megawatts of focused radio energy. The prime sequence took 11 seconds. The proof took 19. The image took 4 minutes and 22 seconds to encode. They included coordinates derived from Voyager's pulsar map, a timestamp in Earth years, and a frequency chosen to cut through interstellar noise. The engineering team recalibrated the beam 3 times to account for Earth's orbital motion over the 37.8-year travel time. As the last pulse faded, the facility went silent. Champagne was opened in the control room. Children drew pictures of the beings they hoped would answer. Scientists published papers estimating response time, 75.6 years minimum if Earth replied immediately. The message left their planet in 2043, but Earth's radio telescopes weren't listening to that part of the sky. 2047 came and went. The signal reached Earth's solar system and passed through it, undetected. No telescope was pointed at the right coordinates. No receiver was tuned to that frequency. By 2051, optimism on the alien world had fractured. The Advocates' Party lost 40% of its seats in the midterm elections. Polling showed 62% of the population now believed Earth had received the message and chosen not to respond. A rival theory gained traction. Humanity had already destroyed itself, either through war or ecological collapse, before the signal arrived. Voyager 1 was a ghost, a monument to a dead civilization. The Council debated whether to send a second message. Observatories scanned Sol's system for signs of activity, radio chatter, thermal signatures, orbital structures. They found nothing conclusive. The silence stretched into its 8th year. But the silence from Earth wasn't intentional. It was a tragedy no one could have predicted. March 2038, a coronal mass ejection 3 times larger than the Carrington event tore through Earth's magnetosphere. Within 18 hours, 67% of orbital satellites were disabled or destroyed. The Deep Space Network's Goldstone facility lost 2 of its 3 main dishes. Canberra went dark completely. Madrid's 70-meter antenna survived but had no power grid to feed it. Reconstruction took 6 years. When funding finally arrived, Congress prioritized the Mars colonies and Artemis lunar operations. Interstellar monitoring was declared non-essential. The alien civilization's follow-up transmission, sent 14 months after their first message, arrived at Earth in 2041. No one was listening. By the time Earth's telescopes were operational again, the alien signal had already passed. On that distant world, the listeners waited. 2 years became 4. 4 became 7. The Silencer faction, once a fringe group representing 11% of the Council, began circulating a document. It argued that Earth's silence wasn't accidental, that a species capable of launching Voyager across interstellar space could certainly detect a directed radio burst. Public opinion shifted. Polls showed 63% now believed humanity had received the message and chosen not to respond. The Silencers won 34 of 81 council seats in the next election. Their platform was simple. Earth's silence was a statement, an assertion of dominance, or worse, a countdown. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Councillor Thex, a former astrophysicist turned political radical, proposed what he called the Observer Initiative. Not a message, not a greeting, a probe designed to reach Earth's solar system and watch. The mission parameters were unprecedented. Approach no closer than 18 astronomical units. Maintain complete radio silence. Observe for 40 of their years, then return. If humanity showed signs of preparing weapons or launching missions toward their home system, the probe would transmit a warning. The Council debated for 9 months. The listeners argued it was provocation. The Silencers argued it was survival. The vote passed 43 to 38. Construction began in orbital shipyards 480 kilometers above their planet's surface. The probe they designed was nothing like Voyager. It was built to stay hidden. The hull was a composite lattice, 4.2 meters long, coated in a carbon nanotube weave that absorbed 99.7% of incident light across the visible and infrared spectrum. No reflective surfaces. No thermal signature above 2.7 Kelvin, the background temperature of space itself. The probe carried 3 redundant imaging arrays, a spectral analyzer tuned to detect industrial pollutants in planetary atmospheres, and a data core capable of storing 8.4 petabytes. Its propulsion was ion-based, producing thrust so gradual that acceleration would be invisible to radar. The engineers built in fail-safes. If the probe detected active scanning, it would power down completely and drift, indistinguishable from a rogue asteroid. Communication was one way, receive only, encrypted with a 2048-qubit key. The mission profile was simple. Approach Earth's solar system from below the ecliptic plane where fewer observation platforms were positioned. Enter a polar orbit around the third planet at 47,000 kilometers altitude. Record for 6 months, then return. The launch was scheduled for 2051, but construction delays pushed it to 2057. The probe left their home system on a Tuesday morning, local time, from a launch platform in geosynchronous orbit. Initial velocity was 18.4 kilometers per second, slow enough to avoid detection by any hypothetical monitoring stations along the route. It would accelerate for 9 years, coast for 64, then decelerate for 10 as it approached the target system. 83 years total. The engineers who designed it were in their 40s and 50s. They'd be dead before it arrived. Their children might live to see the first data packets return, transmitted back across 12.7 light-years at a crawl of 1 kilobit per second. The civilization that launched it understood this. They built monuments to the mission, archives documenting every decision, expecting future generations to interpret the results. They ran probability models. Best case, the probe returned images of an industrialized world, confirmation of technology, maybe even cities. Worst case, it found ruins, or nothing at all. What they didn't account for was that Earth would also be sending more probes into deep space, and one of them would cross paths with theirs. Kepler II launched in 2104 from the European Space Agency's lunar facility at Shackleton Crater. It was a deep space telescope, 11 meters across, designed to survey 340 candidate exoplanets in the Cygnus Lyra region. Its trajectory was a gravity-assist slingshot, swinging past Jupiter to gain velocity before heading out toward the interstellar medium. The alien probe was 47 years into its journey, decelerating as it approached the solar system's outer boundary. Kepler II's course brought it through a corridor 890 million kilometers wide, a routine path chosen for fuel efficiency. The probability of intersection was 1 in 4.7 billion. At 0314 UTC on June 9, 2104, the two craft passed within 620 meters of each other at a combined velocity of 31 kilometers per second. Kepler II's sensor array registered a brief anomaly, a cold mass where there shouldn't be one, then dismissed it as instrument noise. The collision didn't destroy either craft, but it changed both of their courses. 6 hours later, Kepler II's instruments logged something the earlier system had shrugged off. An object was moving through the same corridor of space, only it was doing something no natural body that size should do. It clocked in at a fraction of light speed, fast enough that the tracking software flagged the reading as a probable error before it even finished recording. But the numbers held. Whatever it was, radiated no heat, so the infrared sensors saw nothing. It reflected almost no light, so the optical cameras caught barely a smudge against the dark. A cold, silent thing tearing along at relativistic speed, leaving no wake and no glow. Mission control on Earth got the packet nearly a full day later, thanks to the distance. The analysts looked at the speed, the lack of thermal signature, the odd path, and reached for the simplest label they had. A rogue asteroid, they wrote, flung out of some distant system long ago. Case closed. The scan data that followed would prove otherwise, but by then, the object was already gone. The follow-up scan didn't fit the asteroid story. Rogue asteroids tumble. They're lopsided, pocked, made of whatever debris clumped together in the dark. This object held a trajectory so clean it looked drawn with a ruler. No wobble, no spin, no drift as it moved. Then the composition data came back, and that's where a handful of engineers went quiet. The mass was uniform all the way through. No dense core, no lighter crust, no seams or fractures. Natural rock doesn't form that way. Something has to shape it. A small group ran the analysis again, checked their instruments, then wrote it down plainly. The object's precision and uniformity pointed to one uncomfortable conclusion. It was built. Their report went up the chain and got stamped with a single word that killed it on arrival: speculative. It was filed away, unread by anyone who mattered. The scientist who wrote that report would spend the next decade trying to prove she was right. Her name was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, and she couldn't let it go. On her own time, between assignments, she kept pulling the object's trajectory back up on her screen. If it was built, someone built it somewhere, and a thing moving that fast, that straight, was pointing back along the road it came from. So she ran the line backward. She took its velocity vector and extended it across the star catalogs, thousands of systems, filtering for anything that lined up with the path within the margin of error. Most candidates fell away. The angles were wrong, the distances impossible, the timing off by centuries. But one held. A faint red dwarf, 37 light-years out, sat almost exactly on the object's back trail. Small, dim, the kind of star surveys skip past. When she overlaid the numbers, the object's origin and that little star matched within a hair. Now, Tanaka could have stopped there. She didn't. Tanaka went straight to NASA's Deep Space Network archives. She pulled every transmission log from Voyager 1's final 6 months in 2025. Most of it was routine telemetry, the slow fade of a probe running out of power. Then she found the anomaly. On March 14, 2025, Voyager 1's gyroscopes recorded a sudden 0.7-degree course deviation. The engineers at the time flagged it as instrument drift, nothing unusual for a 48-year-old spacecraft. But Tanaka ran the numbers through her gravity model. That deviation matched the signature of a close stellar flyby. Voyager hadn't drifted. Something with real mass had pulled it off course, hard enough to bend its trajectory by thousands of kilometers over the following weeks. The timing put it right at the edge of the candidate system, exactly where her projections said it would be. She cross-referenced the probe's last known vector with the object's launch point. The margin of error was 340 kilometers across 41 light-years. The connection she made next would rewrite humanity's understanding of first contact. Tanaka submitted her paper to Nature Astronomy in November 2109. The title was careful, hedged with conditionals, but the conclusion was clear. Kepler II had detected a manufactured response to Voyager 1's unintentional crash on an inhabited world. The peer review process took 8 months. The rejection took 3 paragraphs. The reviewers called it speculative, unfalsifiable, a narrative built on circumstantial alignment. One wrote that attributing intent to a gravity signature was, quote, astrology with extra steps. Social media was worse. #Voyager Truthers trended for 4 days, mostly mocking her math. A popular science podcast spent 90 minutes explaining why the paper was, at best, wishful pattern recognition. Tanaka's university didn't fire her, but her funding requests stopped getting approved. She kept teaching orbital mechanics to undergrads and stopped talking about Voyager at conferences. For 18 months, the hypothesis died in silence. No follow-up studies, no replication attempts, no defense. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. One astronomer found evidence that supported her theory. His name was Lior Mezan, a radio astronomer in Tel Aviv who spent his spare time combing through archival data nobody else wanted to touch. In March 2011, he was analyzing Green Bank telescope logs from 2043, looking for fast radio bursts that automated filters might have missed. He found something else. A 14-second transmission, narrowband, 1420.4 MHz. The hydrogen line, the universal frequency SETI, had been monitoring for 150 years. It wasn't a burst. It was structured, modulated, repeating every 2.8 seconds with phase shifts that looked deliberate. The timestamp put it at 0317 UTC, April 9, 2043. The coordinates matched Tanaka's candidate system within the telescope's beam width. Mezan pulled the raw data and ran it through every natural phenomenon filter he had. Pulsar, magnetar, stellar flare, equipment glitch. Nothing fit. The modulation pattern was too clean, the frequency too precise, the duration too short. He contacted Tanaka directly, bypassing journals entirely. She had the transmission analyzed by 3 independent labs within a week. The signal had been sitting in storage for 68 years, and no one had noticed. Tanaka assembled a team within 72 hours. 11 cryptographers, 4 linguists, 2 mathematicians, and a signal processing specialist from MIT who'd cracked Soviet transmissions during the Cold War. They started with pattern recognition, running the signal through every known encryption algorithm. The first layer fell in 18 days, prime numbers, arranged in a sequence that matched the Ulam spiral, then a mathematical proof, elegant and concise, demonstrating the Pythagorean theorem, using geometry humanity had never seen. It was a greeting, unmistakable in its intent. But the bulk of the transmission was something else entirely. 847 kilobytes of structured data, organized in rows and columns, each value between 0 and 255. It had the statistical signature of image data, but the format didn't match anything in the database. JPEG, PNG, TIFF, even obsolete standards from the 1970s, nothing fit. The team spent 6 weeks trying to reverse engineer the encoding scheme. They plotted the data as pixel grids in every conceivable resolution, 256 by 212 by 512, arbitrary aspect ratios. Every attempt produced noise. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a retired engineer who had worked on Voyager's golden record. Martin Kowalski was 81 years old when Tanaka called him. He'd spent 1977 in a lab at JPL, converting photographs into analog waveforms that could survive interstellar radiation for millions of years. The golden record wasn't just audio, it carried 116 images encoded as sound. He looked at the data for less than 3 minutes. The structure was identical, 512 lines, each line encoded as a frequency-modulated analog signal, then digitized at 8-bit resolution. The aliens had studied Voyager's imaging system and used the exact same format to send a message back. The decoding took 14 hours once they knew what they were looking at. Kowalski wrote the conversion script himself, translating the digital values back into waveforms, then rendering them as pixel intensities. The first test produced horizontal banding, artifacts from a timing mismatch. He adjusted the sample rate by 0.3% and ran it again. The screen filled with an image, not noise, not static, a landscape, unmistakably real, captured by technology that had never existed on Earth. The resolution was crude by modern standards, 512 by 480 pixels, but the detail was staggering. The image they decoded was the first photograph ever taken of an alien world by its own inhabitants. The planet was tidally locked. One hemisphere blazed in perpetual daylight under a bloated orange star, surface temperatures estimated at 215 degrees Celsius based on the spectral signature. The opposite side, frozen in eternal darkness, its atmosphere condensed into nitrogen snow that never melted. Between them ran a thin band of twilight, maybe 400 kilometers wide, where the temperature hovered near freezing and liquid water could exist. The photograph showed that Terminator zone from above. Cities clustered along the twilight strip, their geometry alien but unmistakable. Curved structures that followed the arc of the habitable zone, connected by what looked like elevated transit lines. The composition was deliberate. Centered in the frame was a single structure, larger than the rest, with radial symmetry that suggested either cultural or functional importance. A monument, maybe, or a power station. The lighting was natural, shadowless, the kind you only get at the edge of eternal day. Tanaka's team processed 4 more images over the next 36 hours. Atmospheric composition diagrams, a star chart showing their location relative to Sol, a schematic of what appeared to be the probe that had intercepted Voyager. Each one encoded in humanity's own format, sent across 12 light-years as a declaration. We found your message. We understood it. The second image revealed something humanity had never considered, what the aliens looked like. They stood upright on 6 jointed limbs, each ending in what looked like branching filaments. No eyes in the human sense. Instead, clustered sensory organs that refracted light like prisms, evolved for a world where the sun was a distant white point, and most energy came from geothermal vents. Their bodies were segmented, encased in something between chitin and mineral, with ridges that suggested both structure and communication. The physiology was alien, in every sense. No bilateral symmetry, no DNA we'd recognize, but the posture, the arrangement, the deliberate framing of the photograph itself, it all screamed intelligence. One figure held an object, a tool or a symbol, positioned toward the camera with clear intent. Another stood behind what could only be described as an instrument panel, its surface covered in geometric patterns that matched the symbols in the first transmission. They weren't just responding to our message, they were showing us who they were. The third image was the one that changed everything, because it showed Voyager 1's wreckage. The probe was half buried in translucent ice, its antenna bent at a sickening angle, but the golden record's casing was intact, clearly visible in the center of the frame. The aluminum cover, the stylus cartridge, even the engraved diagram on the surface. There was no mistaking it. Dating the ice layers around the crash site put the impact between 2025 and 2030, exactly when Voyager should have crossed into interstellar space in our timeline. The aliens had included a reference marker in the corner, a mineral deposit with known radiometric properties. Independent labs confirmed the timestamp within an 18-month window. First contact hadn't happened in 2043. It happened decades earlier when Voyager 1 veered off course and crashed on a frozen moon 37 light-years away. The aliens found it, studied it, decoded the golden record, and sent us a response. We just hadn't been listening. The revelation triggered a global reckoning and a frantic effort to send a response before it was too late. The United Nations convened an emergency session in March 2011. 89 nations voted to authorize the Bridge Initiative, a coordinated transmission using the upgraded Deep Space Network and 3 newly constructed radio arrays in Chile, Australia, and South Africa. Total output, 4.2 million watts across a 12-hour broadcast window. The message was simple. We received your transmission on October 14, 2043. We understand you found Voyager 1. We did not intentionally send it to you, but we are grateful you reached out. This is Earth's formal reply. It included updated images of humanity, our current technology, and a mathematical proof showing we'd decoded their coordinate system. Linguists, engineers, and exobiologists worked in 3 shifts for 9 months to craft a response that balanced honesty with caution. They didn't promise a visit. They didn't ask for one. They simply said, "We're here, we're listening, and we want to continue this conversation." The message was sent in 2112, but the response wouldn't arrive until 2149. 37 years. That's how long it takes light to cross the gulf between Earth and that alien world. Send a message, wait 37 years for it to arrive. Wait another 37 for the reply to come back. In 2112, when Earth transmitted its response, the engineers were in their 40s and 50s. By 2149, when the answer could arrive, most would be dead. The project leads calculated the math openly. This conversation would outlive them. They built continuity into the mission design. Successor teams were appointed. Training protocols ensured knowledge transfer every 5 years. A dedicated archive tracked every transmission, every decision, every hypothesis about the civilization on the other end. But no protocol could erase the gulf. You can't negotiate in real time across 74 light-years. You can't clarify a misunderstanding, walk back a phrase, read the room. Every word you send is a time capsule. The scientists who sent the 2112 message knew they would never hear the reply, but their children might. On March 14, 2149, the signal reached the alien world, 1,420 megahertz, modulated in the same format they'd used 37 years earlier. Demodulation took 6 hours. Translation took 11 days. The message was direct. Humanity apologized for the 2075 silence, explained the solar storm that had knocked out the relay network, and confirmed the intention to continue dialogue. It included updated star charts, chemical signatures of Earth's atmosphere, and a request, "What do you want us to know?" Within 48 hours, the alien government convened an emergency council. Linguists confirmed the message was authentic, matching vocabulary and syntax from the 25 exchange. Astronomers verified the star charts. The chemistry matched Voyager's data on Earth's biosignatures. But the tone of the debate shifted fast. Some factions argued this proved humanity's reliability, that they'd rebuilt their systems and honored the conversation. Others pointed to the 37-year gap, the lack of redundancy, the fragility of a civilization that could go dark for decades. The reaction on the alien world wasn't relief, it was division. The stealth probe had launched in 2089, 23 years before Earth's apology arrived. It was already 60 years into a 320-year journey to the solar system, and now, with Earth's message decoded, it became the flashpoint. One coalition argued for recall. If humanity was willing to communicate openly, why risk a covert mission? The probe carried no weapons, but its mere existence, if discovered, could be seen as espionage. Trust, they said, required transparency. The opposition framed it differently. Earth had gone silent for 37 years without warning. What if it happened again? What if the next gap lasted centuries? The probe was insurance, a way to verify claims, to understand the species behind the transmissions before committing to deeper contact. The debate leaked to their public networks within a week. Protests formed in 3 of their major population centers. Opinion surveys showed a 48 to 47% split, with 5% undecided. The council scheduled a binding vote for 19 days after the message's arrival. The decision they made would determine whether the probe continued its mission or was recalled, but the vote was too close to call. The vote came down 51 to 49 in favor of recall. The alien government drafted a second message, this one transparent, offering peaceful contact and apologizing for the deception. They transmitted the recall signal at 23:14 local time, a 40-watt pulse repeated every 6 minutes. The probe was already 8.7 light-years from home. The signal would take 8.7 years to reach it, traveling at light speed while the probe continued at 0.12 c. By the time the command arrived, the probe would have covered another 1.04 light-years. The alien engineers ran the numbers. Even if the probe immediately reversed thrust, it would take decades to decelerate and return. They sent the message anyway, knowing it was likely futile. By the time the signal reached the probe, it would already be entering Earth's solar system. In 2140, the probe crossed the heliopause at 121 AU from the Sun. Its passive sensors registered a sharp increase in solar wind particles and a shift in magnetic field orientation. It had entered Earth's territory. The probe's instruments began mapping electromagnetic emissions across the radio spectrum. It catalogued 47,832 active satellites in various orbits, their transponder signals creating a dense grid around the planet. It recorded television broadcasts, GPS signals, military radar pulses, each transmission logged and compressed. At 89 AU, it detected organized patterns in the outer system. Neptune's orbit showed artificial objects, small but numerous. Jupiter had 14 active stations, their heat signatures visible even at this distance. What it detected in Earth's orbit was something the aliens never anticipated: a defense network designed to intercept unidentified objects. The Space Situational Awareness Network registered the anomaly on March 17, 2140, at 0422 UTC. An object near Neptune with no heat signature, no radar reflection, moving at 0.12 c on a trajectory that would bring it within 12 AU of Earth in 37 weeks. Analysts at the Joint Space Operations Center ran 6 independent trajectory calculations. All confirmed the same approach vector, the same impossible speed. Natural objects didn't move like this. Comets left thermal trails. Asteroids reflected radar. The object was 43 meters across, traveling faster than any human-made craft, and it was slowing down. Deceleration burns were detected at 67 AU, and again at 51 AU. each time adjusting course with precision that ruled out natural phenomena. Military command elevated the threat level to Amber 3. The order to intercept was issued within hours, but the weapons sent to destroy it would take months to reach its target. The kill vehicle left the Lunar Defense Station at 0400 hours, riding a plume of superheated propellant that lit the dark side of the moon for a few seconds. It carried no warhead. It didn't need one. At the closing speeds involved, a slug of tungsten the size of a coffee can would hit with the energy of a small tactical bomb. Everything about it was built around a single number, the impact point. Onboard sensors would track the target's heat signature, feed corrections to the thrusters, and hold the collision course through every evasive maneuver. There was no capture arm, no docking ring, no sample bay. The engineers who designed it had one instruction, and they'd followed it exactly. Collision, not capture. For weeks it coasted through the dark, a blind arrow aimed at something nobody understood. And on the other end of that trajectory, the object it was chasing had already gone quiet. The stealth probe received the recall signal 3 days before the interceptor reached firing range, but it was designed to prioritize its original mission. Inside the probe, there was no panic, because there was nothing to panic. There was only a decision tree and a directive that had been burned into its core logic before it ever left home. The recall order arrived clean, verified, authenticated, and the probe did exactly what it was built to do. It weighed it. On one side sat the command to abort. On the other sat the reason it existed at all. Decades of transit, billions of kilometers, a target that matched something in its archive that no human had ever seen up close. Aborting meant turning away with the answer within reach. It ran the calculation thousands of times and reached the same conclusion each pass. The questions it had traveled this far to answer would go unanswered forever. So it did something its programmers hadn't quite anticipated. It looked for a third option, a way to satisfy the recall and the directive at once. The decision it made would determine whether first contact ended in understanding or catastrophe. The probe had spent its entire existence hiding. Radar-absorbent hull, minimal thermal emission, no active broadcasts. A machine built to move through the solar system without ever being seen. And then, in a single instant, it threw all of that away. It powered up its main antenna and aimed a full-spectrum signal straight back at Earth. Everything came out at once. Its mission parameters, its point of origin, the coordinates of where it had come from, and a request repeated on a loop in every encoding it carried. Hold fire. It stripped away the one thing that had kept it alive, because staying hidden now meant dying silent. The signal crossed the gap at light speed, but the gap was enormous. The interceptor was still closing, tungsten and momentum, and no way to change its mind once the final burn committed. The message reached Earth 7 hours before the interceptor reached its target, and Mission Control had to decide whether to trust it. With 11 minutes left on the clock, the abort command went out. It wasn't a vote anymore. Someone with the authority typed a string of characters and hit send, and the interceptor's guidance package rewrote itself in flight. The kinetic profile dissolved. No more collision course, no more tungsten meeting hull at closing speed. Instead, the thrusters fired in a new sequence, bleeding off the exact velocity that would have turned the probe into vapor, trading a strike for a soft approach. For a few seconds, nobody in the room breathed. The math had to hold. One misplaced burn, and the two craft would still slam together, just slower and messier. Then the telemetry confirmed the vectors were converging gently, and the whole trajectory bent from weapon to handshake. What happened next became the most documented moment in human history, because for the first time, two civilizations met face to face. The interceptor spent its last reserves matching the stealth probe's speed and heading, closing the gap meter by meter until the relative velocity dropped to almost nothing. Two machines, built by hands and by whatever the other side had instead of hands, finally drifting side by side. The cameras caught all of it. Not a blur, not a flash, but a slow, deliberate approach. Two spacecraft hanging together against the dark, with the planet turning beneath them. 37 light-years of misunderstanding and 74 years of silence, closed to a few dozen meters. This was the thing the whole story had been building toward. Voyager falling out of the sky onto an alien world was never the ending. It was the first line. Everything since had been the reply, and now the two authors of the conversation were looking straight at each other. They held position above the planet where Voyager came down. The human interceptor kept its distance. The alien probe kept its stealth coating and its unreadable geometry. Neither one fired. Neither one turned and ran. That standoff itself was information. A weapon would have struck. A scout would have fled. This thing did neither. It waited, matching our craft's patience with its own, as if both sides understood that the next move mattered more than the one before it. And here's what nobody was saying out loud yet. Each delegation had arrived carrying something. The humans hadn't sent an empty shell across interstellar space, and the probe hadn't crossed the void with nothing inside it either. Both had packed the void with intent. But the silence between the two ships wasn't empty. So the probe sent first. One packet, tiny by our standards, maybe a few kilobytes of pure reason, prime numbers stacked in sequence. The value of pi carried out far enough to prove it wasn't a fluke. The mass ratio of a proton to an electron, a number any civilization anywhere would land on the same way. Tucked at the end sat a simple request, encoded the only way math can be honest. We come without weapons. We'd like to talk. It was the least threatening sentence humanity had ever composed, and it took 40,000 years of travel to deliver it. The response came back fast, their own proof, cleaner than ours, elegant in a way that felt almost polite, but woven through the numbers was a second layer, a record they'd attached like a footnote to the whole conversation, and what they sent back rewrote the history of our solar system. It was an astronomical log, star positions, orbital drift, a timestamp anchored to the slow wobble of their own galactic neighborhood. Their instruments had watched their sky for a very long time, and they'd flagged one event worth saving. Roughly 12,000 years ago, an object crossed their system, small, metallic, trailing a faint radio whisper. Its shape, its trajectory, the way it tumbled through their outer planets, all of it lined up with something they recognized the instant our probe arrived. It looked exactly like Voyager. Read that timeline again. 12,000 years back, we were chipping flint and painting cave walls. There were no rockets, no radio, no golden records, no NASA. Nobody on Earth could have launched anything, let alone a craft identical to one we wouldn't build until the 20th century. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Back on Earth, the data hit the archives hard. Scientists pulled every scrap they had on Voyager 1, the launch specs, the antenna geometry, the exact bend of its trajectory as it slingshot past Jupiter and Saturn. Then they laid the alien record beside it. It matched, not roughly, not close enough. The dish, the boom, the radioisotope generator, the mass, the spin, even the golden record, that gold-plated copper disc bolted to the side, showed up in their scan of the ancient object. Same diameter, same grooves. Every measurable feature aligned with a probe we assembled and launched in 1977. And yet, their sky had already logged it, passing through, 12,000 years earlier. Two identical craft, one timeline that refuses to hold. Someone, or something, had sent Voyager before we did. The conference call lasted 11 hours. Physicists in Geneva, historians in Washington, cosmologists in Tokyo, all staring at the same impossible data. The probe the aliens found carried isotopic signatures consistent with 1950s Earth metallurgy. Not 1970s Voyager-era alloys, 1950s. Three theories emerged within the first hour. Theory 1, a closed time loop. The probe sent forward and then backward, creating its own past. Theory 2, a parallel construction, some Soviet or private project that beat NASA by decades and kept it buried. Theory 3, alien forgery, a test of human reaction to impossible information. None of them fit. The isotope ratios were too precise for a fake. The design blueprints matched Voyager's geometry to within 0.03 millimeters, but the materials list read like something from the Eisenhower administration. And if it was a loop, where did the original come from? Every causal chain had a missing link. Then a retired NASA engineer opened a file that had been sealed for 40 years. Project Forerunner, authorized 1957, 6 months after Sputnik. A deep space probe designed to reach Jupiter within 18 years using an experimental ion drive and a radioisotope thermoelectric generator pulled from a scrapped Navy satellite. The schematics looked like Voyager's older, cruder sibling. Same geometry, same antenna, same golden record concept, though theirs held only 90 minutes of audio. The test launch happened in March 1959 from a salt flat in Nevada, not Cape Canaveral. Telemetry held for 4 minutes, then cut out as the probe crossed 12,000 kilometers altitude. Recovery teams found nothing. No debris field, no impact crater, no wreckage in the projected flight path. The program was shuttered 8 months later, files classified, engineers reassigned. By 1977, when Voyager was being assembled, Forerunner had been so thoroughly buried that the design team reinvented the same solutions from scratch. The golden record, the antenna config, even the trajectory calculations. Parallel evolution, they'd have called it. Except now, the aliens were holding the original. What the documents didn't mention was where, or when, it went. The alien astronomers sent a 47-page document, translated into mathematics humanity could barely follow. Their hypothesis centered on Jupiter's magnetosphere in the late 1950s. During Forerunner's projected flight path, Jupiter had been undergoing a period of extreme magnetic instability, its field lines twisting into configurations that modern physics says shouldn't be stable. They proposed a closed time-like curve, a loop in spacetime where the past and future connect. Not theoretical, observable if you knew where to look. Forerunner hadn't disappeared in 1959. It had fallen into a gravitational eddy, a pocket of curved spacetime near Jupiter's L4 Lagrange point, and emerged 4.2 million years earlier on a trajectory that sent it straight toward their world. The math held, barely. It required a metric tensor that human physicists were only starting to toy with in 2026, but it predicted Forerunner's arrival date to within 6 months of when the aliens said they found it. It explained the isotopes, the design, the record, everything except how the loop formed in the first place. Closed time-like curves need exotic matter, negative energy, conditions that shouldn't exist near a gas giant. If they're right, Voyager didn't just crash, it arrived before it left. JPL ran the calculations 3 times. The 1950s launch window matched a gravitational assist trajectory through Jupiter's magnetosphere that wouldn't be mapped until 1973. The abandoned flight path from the archive aligned perfectly with a closed time-like curve requiring Jupiter's mass, precise velocity, and a plasma density spike recorded by Juno in 2019. The numbers locked. Voyager 1 didn't malfunction. It executed a temporal displacement, arriving in the past as wreckage on an alien world. The probe that launched in 1977 became the prototype recovered in 1952. It was its own grandfather, but that opened a question no one wanted to ask. If the Voyager program existed because engineers reverse-engineered the 1952 prototype, and the prototype was Voyager sent backward, then where did the design originate? Not 1952, not 1977. The loop had no entry point, no first draft. The golden record, the trajectory, the plutonium generator, all of it inherited from itself. A causal paradox with no author. Physicists called it a bootstrap. Information with no source, a circle that shouldn't close. The aliens had an answer. Humanity didn't like it. The delegation transmitted a star map. 4 systems 80 to 310 light-years out, each containing wreckage identical to Voyager 1. Same construction, same isotopic signature in the plutonium, same golden record down to the Bach. None of the civilizations that found them had built them. All 4 wreckages predated local spaceflight by decades. The aliens' theory: a third party placed the probes in multiple timelines, seeding closed loops across the galaxy. Not human, not alien, something else, engineering causality itself. Now, the aliens could have withheld this. They didn't. Instead, they showed us a map, 6 points of light scattered across a slice of the galaxy, each one a homeworld, each one circled in the same steady glow. And beside every world, a small icon we recognized instantly, because we'd just watched one of our own drift down through an alien sky. A probe. 6 probes, 6 senders, all inside a bubble, maybe 200 light-years wide. Then came the timestamps. Not one of these launches was ancient. The oldest fell within the last 15,000 years, a blink against a galaxy that's been turning for 13 billion. 6 separate civilizations, none aware of the others, all reaching outward in the same brief window with the same quiet message riding along. That's not coincidence. Something, or someone, has been seeding this corner of the sky, handing the same gift to whoever's listening, and every civilization that found one had done exactly what humanity just did. They built a probe, they pressed a record, they etched a map of pulsars pointing back home, recorded greetings in the voices they had, and pressed in images of their world, their children, their hands. The structure was identical every single time. Same idea, same instinct, same reaching. But the aliens flagged something we'd missed. Each record carried one piece the others didn't. A single edition, unique to its sender, tucked in among the shared greetings. Not a hello, an instruction meant only for the one who eventually found it. 5 of those instructions had already been read, decoded by the civilizations that recovered the probes. 5 finders knew what they'd been asked to do. The instructions on Voyager's record had never been decoded, until now. When Carl Sagan's team cut the golden record in 1977, they encoded everything in analog grooves, sound, and images pressed as waveforms a needle could trace. But there was a second layer down there, riding beneath the first, at a resolution no 1970s lab could have resolved or even detected. It had been waiting the whole time. Read with alien optics, it resolved into a star chart, not a greeting, not a portrait, a destination, one point marked out of thousands, with a line drawn straight to it, and attached to that mark, a number, a countdown. 2,000 years, measured from the moment each probe is discovered. Find the record, start the clock, reach the marked star before it runs out. Every sender was given the same window from the day their probe was picked up. For the aliens, the deadline passed 3 centuries ago. They tried. The alien civilization mobilized everything they had the moment they deciphered the coordinates. But their fastest ships took 180 years to reach the rendezvous point, and by then the window had closed 140 years earlier. When they finally arrived, the system was quiet. No signals, no waiting vessels, no evidence anyone had ever been there. Just empty space and a single rocky moon orbiting a dim red dwarf. Except the moon wasn't a moon. The mass was right, the orbit was stable, but the surface was too smooth. No craters, no weathering, no variation in albedo across 4,700 square kilometers. They sent a probe. It took 6 months to confirm what the scans suggested. The entire object was artificial. What they found there changed their understanding of the universe. The structure measured 2,100 kilometers across, roughly the diameter of Earth's moon, but with 1/8 the mass. Spectroscopy returned nothing. No iron, no silicon, no carbon signature. The material didn't absorb, reflect, or emit in any wavelength they tested. For 300 years they've mapped it, sampled it, built research stations in orbit around it. The surface is seamless, no panels or seams, no entry points. Internal scans show cavities and conduits spanning thousands of kilometers, but no power readings, no heat, no magnetic field. It's been dormant since before their species discovered fire. They've run every simulation, tried every activation theory. Nothing. The structure has what they estimate to be 14 distinct interface points scattered across its surface, but every one requires an input sequence they don't have. So they waited. They were waiting for someone else to arrive, someone with the second key. The hidden data layer on Voyager's golden record isn't a message. It's a 90 kilobyte instruction file written in the same base 16 mathematical language as the alien probe. When the two datasets are overlaid, they form a complete sequence, 47 commands long. The alien record contains spatial coordinates, a time window, and half of an encryption key. Humanity's record contains the other half of the key and the activation protocol. Neither civilization was given enough information to proceed alone. The structure at the coordinates has 14 interface points. The combined sequence from both records addresses all 14 in a specific order, with timing intervals measured in milliseconds. Get the order wrong, or the timing off by more than 3%, and the sequence resets. Two species, separated by 600 light-years, each handed one half of the same lock. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The third file sits dormant inside the sequence until the moment both keys merge. Then it unpacks. 47 kilobytes of plain text, no encryption left. The header reads, Builder Directive 6 amps, timestamp 2.3 million years old. The message is 11 words in a mathematical syntax both sides can pass. Do not activate this gate until all 6 have gathered. Not 5, not 4, 6. The alien network runs a correlative search across every probe trajectory they've mapped. 6 launch windows, 6 velocity profiles, 6 destinations, each calculated to reach a habitable world within a 900 light-year radius of the gate's estimated position. Humanity and the aliens weren't the only ones with keys. The census comes back in 11 days. 4 civilizations confirmed. 2 probes landed on worlds with detectable techno-signatures, both within the past 6,000 years. Both went quiet between 800 and 1,200 years ago. No radio, no laser pulse, nothing. The alien diplomats present 3 scenarios: extinction events, natural or otherwise, self-imposed silence, waiting like the aliens did, or they opened their gates early, alone, and the network never heard from them again. Earth's Science Council models partial activation. If 4 keys trigger the gate instead of 6, the energy differential sits at 31% below design spec. The structure might hold. It might collapse. It might open something that wasn't supposed to open. Opening it early would have consequences the message didn't specify. Both governments table the same question within 72 hours. Do we wait, possibly decades or centuries, for 2 civilizations that may not exist? Or do we proceed, accept the risk, and find out what the builders meant by consequences? The alien consensus leans toward patience. Their species measures time in millennia. Humanity's Security Council splits 8 to 7 in favor of activation. The geopolitical window won't stay open. If we wait, the coalition fractures. If we move together, now, with 67% of the required keys. Diplomats draft 14 contingency frameworks. Engineers calculate abort thresholds down to the microsecond. Both sides agree to a 90-day deliberation period, then a final vote. On day 16, a modulated X-ray burst hits the alien listening post at 0.6 C from a bearing 340 light-years out. Then the 4th civilization made contact, and everything accelerated. The 4th species lives in a trinary system 140 light-years out, 3 suns locked in a gravitational dance that makes stable orbits a nightmare. They found their probe 800 years ago, crashed in a tidal-locked zone where temperatures swing 600 degrees between hemispheres. Within 97 years, they'd cracked the hidden layer. For the last 200 years, they've been parked at the gate coordinates, running scans, mapping the structure, transmitting status updates every 18 months. Their message to the network is 4.7 terabytes, mostly sensor logs and translation matrices. But the final data packet is different. It's a positional catalog, electromagnetic signatures, heat blooms, neutrino scatter, 12 objects clustered within 0.003 light-years of the gate's predicted location, most of them broadcasting low-frequency maintenance pings. They weren't alone there. Species 5 arrived 90 years ago from a direction the fourth civilization hadn't been watching. No introduction, just a clean handshake protocol and a dump of their own probe data. They'd been there 61 years before making contact, running silent, studying the others first. Together, they've mapped 83% of the gate's outer shell. It's 640 meters across, non-reflective, radiating in a narrow infrared band that matches the cosmic microwave background to within 0.002 Kelvin. No visible seams, no docking ports, no response to any electromagnetic frequency they've tried. The structure just sits there, inert, waiting. Both species have been pinging the sixth civilization for decades. Tight beam transmissions, modulated gravitational waves, even physical probes sent to the coordinates logged in the network. Nothing comes back. Not silence, not refusal, just empty space where the signal should bounce. What they'd learned made waiting the only rational choice. The network logs placed the sixth probe in the Carina region, recovered 4,000 years ago by a civilization orbiting a K-type star 2,800 light-years from Earth. They decoded the hidden layer in 340 years, transmitted their findings to the network, and went silent 3,200 years ago. No distress signal, no goodbye, just a sudden drop to zero traffic. Species 4 and 5 have three working theories: extinction, self-imposed or otherwise; technological isolation, a deliberate withdrawal from the network for reasons no one can guess; or refusal, the possibility that they reached the gate, saw what was on the other side, and chose not to enter. The hidden layer contains a fallback protocol, 16 kilobytes of executable code that activates if any probe goes silent for more than 1,000 years. It reroutes traffic, adjusts the coordination timers, and broadcasts an amended rendezvous sequence to the remaining civilizations. The gate's builders had planned for this scenario. Beneath that fallback protocol, encrypted 3 layers deeper, sits a time lock. If the sixth key doesn't arrive within 5,000 years of the first probe's discovery, the gate activates automatically. No consensus needed, no vote. The first probe was found 4,603 years ago. That gives the galaxy 397 years to either find the missing key or accept that the gate opens whether they're ready or not. The architects had anticipated gridlock. They'd built in a deadline to force the decision. But the species at the gate had found something else, a loophole. The fifth species ran the encryption through a quantum lattice and discovered a partial activation sequence. 5 keys can power the gate enough to send a probe through, opening a one-way corridor for approximately 14 seconds. The math is brutal. A probe goes in, transmits whatever it finds, but the return path requires all 6 keys to stabilize. Without the 6th, the corridor collapses. Anything inside is severed from both sides. The coalition reviewed the proposal for 18 months. Risk, total loss of the probe and any data it carries. Reward, confirmation of what lies on the other side before the automatic activation. They proposed sending one. Humanity volunteered. A crewed mission was rejected within 6 hours. Too much mass, too much uncertainty, too many variables the gate's tolerances couldn't account for. Instead, engineers at JPL designed a 940-kilogram probe carrying compressed copies of all 5 keys and 2.7 petabytes of human history. The archive includes every written language, 8 million hours of music, maps of 14,000 cities, genetic data from 600,000 species, and the full text of every scientific paper published since 1665. If the probe returns, we learn what the architects built. If it doesn't, whoever finds it learns who we were. The design took 9 months. Fabrication took 7 more. Testing revealed the probe could survive the corridor's gravitational shear for 11 seconds, leaving a 3-second margin to cross and begin transmission. The launch window opened exactly 30 days after the decision. The probe separated from its carrier at 0614 UTC. Thrusters fired in sequence, pushing it toward the gate's center at 47 meters per second. Telemetry came back clean. Stable orientation, shielding intact, all systems nominal. At 9 seconds it crossed the event threshold. The data stream spiked, flooding receivers with gravitational readings, electromagnetic flux, and something the sensors couldn't classify. Then, at 91 seconds, silence. The gate didn't close. Its surface kept rippling, faint blue light pulsing in waves that traveled from rim to center and back again. 5 civilizations monitored every frequency, every particle flux, every gravitational tremor. Nothing. 72 hours later, something came back, but it wasn't the probe. The gate flared white. A craft emerged, twice the probe's mass, its hull geometry matching the gate's own architecture down to the nanometer. It trailed a luminous tether that stretched back through the aperture, vanishing into whatever lay beyond. The craft didn't maneuver. It drifted, oriented itself toward the nearest relay, and began transmitting. A single message, 47 kilobytes, repeating every 8.3 seconds. The linguistic analysis teams from all 5 civilizations ran it through every known syntax tree, every phonetic database, every symbolic structure in their archives. No match. The grammar was coherent but alien. The phonemes clustered in patterns that didn't correspond to any of the 5 languages or the fragments of the 6th they'd recovered from Voyager's memory. It was structured like a greeting, but the referents were untranslatable. Then the translation algorithms locked onto a pattern. It was Old Earth Sanskrit. The message identified the craft as a bridge keeper. It carried instructions from the far side. The 6th civilization had not fallen. They'd crossed through 3,000 years ago and built a settlement in the system the gate connected to, a place with 2 stars and gravity 12% higher than their origin world. They couldn't return. The gate's mechanics required symmetry, 6 activation keys on each side to stabilize the crossing. They'd brought their key through, but the return corridor wouldn't hold without all 6 re-engaged from both ends simultaneously. They'd been waiting, watching, hoping someone would find Voyager and solve the lock. The craft's data payload included star charts, atmospheric readings, population estimates. 14 generations had lived and died on the far side. They'd adapted, thrived, built cities under alien suns. But they'd kept the Sanskrit alive, encoded into every system, every protocol, every transmission, in case the day came when the gate opened again. The message ended with an image file, 3 megabytes, captured from the far side surface. Mountains of crystalline silicate rising 9 kilometers high, rivers flowing uphill through magnetic channels, and in the valleys, structures that predated the 6th civilization's arrival by millennia. What they'd seen on the far side was the reason they stayed. The emissary presented the 6th key in a shielded container. Alongside it came 4 terabytes of data, observations compiled over 3,200 years of continuous study. Their proposal was simple: all 6 civilizations, full activation protocol, a unified crossing within 90 days. They'd mapped the far side down to the molecular level, catalogued atmospheric composition shifts every 6 hours, documented geomagnetic reversals that followed no planetary cycle. The uphill rivers weren't rivers at all. They were transport channels using principles the 6th civilization still couldn't replicate after 32 centuries of research. The structures in the valleys showed construction techniques matching no known geology. Precision cuts through bedrock at angles thermodynamics shouldn't allow. material composites that changed density based on gravitational field strength. Everything pointed to intentional design on a scale that dwarfed the gate itself. But the archive contained something else, a warning the builders never sent. The sixth civilization had sent 11 expeditions through the gate over the centuries. 9 returned. What they found wasn't a destination world, it was a hub, a junction point connecting 847 individual gates, each one identical in construction, each leading to a different network. The expedition teams spent decades mapping connections. Gates arranged in a spherical configuration 12 kilometers in diameter, suspended in a stable pocket of curved space-time. No visible supports, no power infrastructure. Gravity fluctuated by 0.3 grams depending on position within the sphere. Each gate's destination showed the same architectural signature, the same impossible angles, the same material composites, the same physics-defying engineering. Whoever built this network hadn't just connected a few worlds. They'd threaded together thousands of star systems across distances that should take light centuries to cross. And in the center of the junction, they found the architect's last message. It wasn't a transmission, it was embedded in the junction's structural foundation, written in mathematics that transcended language. A historical record spanning 1.2 million years, documenting the network's construction by a coalition of 10,000 species across 50,000 star systems. The architects had built it as a unity project, species that had never met, coordinating across galactic distances, pouring resources into a shared infrastructure that would eliminate borders, collapse travel time, link every participating civilization into a single connected web. The record showed activation dates, expansion phases, celebration protocols when new gates came online. Then the entries changed tone. 400,000 years into operation, anomalies appeared. Gates activating without authorization, transit delays extending from seconds to days, destinations shifting mid-crossing. The coalition convened 67 times trying to diagnose the problem. Their best engineers couldn't locate the source. The network didn't fail. It was shut down, deliberately. The architects had used the network for 18 million years. They'd mapped 4 galaxies, connected 9,000 worlds, built a lattice of gates that let information cross 1 billion light-years in seconds. Then, 750,000 years ago, something came through. Not a ship, not a signal in any conventional sense, a pattern, self-replicating, faster than light, riding the quantum entanglement between gates like a virus riding neural pathways. The emissary's logs showed 47 worlds going dark in 11 hours. The architects tried to quarantine it. They severed 2,300 gates, isolated entire galactic arms, burned data cores to cut transmission paths. Nothing worked. Whatever it was learned, adapted, jumped gaps the engineers thought impossible. So they shut it all down. Every gate, every relay, every quantum link across 4 galaxies, closed in a coordinated blackout that took 16 days to execute. The network fell silent. The patterns stopped spreading, and the architects scattered the keys across the void, encoded in probes that would take eons to find. The emissary's final data file contained the architect's last instruction. Do not reopen the network. The instruction repeated in 14 languages, encoded 9 different ways. Buried in layers of encryption, the architects knew only advanced species could crack. The probes weren't gifts. They were warnings wrapped in temptation. Any civilization capable of finding a Voyager, decoding its message, and reaching the coordinates would also have the technology to understand what they were unlocking. The architects had bet everything on that understanding, producing caution. They'd been wrong about humanity. The 5 other civilizations had found their probes centuries to millennia before Earth launched Voyager. 3 had translated the warning and stopped. 2 had gone further, reached the gate chambers, seen the lockout protocols. All 5 had made the same decision: leave it closed. Then Voyager crashed. Then the sixth gate opened partway, and the emissary woke up, and 6 civilizations found themselves standing in front of a door the architects had welded shut for a reason none of them fully understood. Now, humanity and the 5 others faced a choice the architects had made for them. Open the gate fully and reconnect the network, risking whatever the architects had locked away, or destroy the 6 keys and strand the emissary's civilization forever. The debate lasted 4 months. 2 civilizations voted to open: a hive intelligence that saw the pattern as potentially containable, and a machine collective that believed 750,000 years was long enough for any threat to decay. 2 voted to destroy: a post-biological species that had survived 3 extinction events and wouldn't risk a 4th, and an aquatic civilization whose translation of the architect's warning included details the others hadn't seen. The 5th abstained. They were philosophers, and they argued the decision belonged to the ones with the most at stake. Humanity held the tie-breaking vote. The ISS Council split 4-3 in favor of opening. The UN Security Council deadlocked. 17 countries recalled their representatives in protest. The emissary waited in lunar orbit, its civilization 11 days from total systems failure, while Earth's governments burned weeks in procedural gridlock. Then the 6th transmission came through, not from the emissary, from inside the gate itself, 750,000 years old, preserved in a buffer the architects had left running. 14 words, translated into every language simultaneously. The 6th civilization broke the deadlock with a single statement. The message came from a research expedition, not a military force. 47 individuals representing a species that had entered the junction 3,000 years ago, searching for a way home after their star system collapsed. They'd been stranded inside the network ever since, mapping connections, cataloging nodes, studying the architecture. They'd passed through 612 different gates, visited 89 junctions spanning 4 galaxies, found 23 other dead civilizations, all wiped out by their own weapons or environmental collapse. 0 traces of the entity, no residue, no damage patterns, no signs of forced entry or predation, just abandoned infrastructure and the same recurring shutdown protocol. Their conclusion: the threat was either extinct or a fabrication, a panic response the architects had written into the system to justify their control. The entity had never been real, or it had died 750,000 years ago and the lockdown had continued on autopilot. But they'd also found something the architects left behind: proof. Buried 18 kilometers deep in the junction's central core, behind 9 layers of encryption and a physical seal that required samples from all 7 original architect species to open. A data archive, 4.7 petabytes of sensor logs, telemetry records, and tactical reports from the final 96 hours before the shutdown. The entity had broken through Junction 14 in the Carina sector, consuming 3 connected civilizations in 11 days. The architects had fought it for 6 weeks, losing 40% of their fleet before deploying a weapon that didn't kill it. It destabilized its structure, forced it out of the junction network, and ejected it back into normal space-time. The logs included exact coordinates, a trajectory model, and a decay estimate. The entity hadn't been destroyed. It had been pushed somewhere it couldn't easily return from, somewhere the architects believed it would dissipate over geological time. 750,000 years later, the math still held. The coordinates place it in a system all 6 civilizations recognize. Sagittarius sector, galactic longitude 23.7 degrees, 40,000 light-years from Sol. A dense globular cluster containing 890,000 stars packed into a sphere 150 light-years across. None of the 6 species had ever sent a probe there. The stellar density made navigation nearly impossible, radiation levels were extreme, and there'd never been a strategic reason to try. Long-range scans from all 6 civilizations showed nothing anomalous. Background radiation matched predictions, stellar distribution was normal, no unusual energy signatures or mass concentrations. But the resolution limit at that distance was 0.3 light-years. Anything smaller than a planetary system would be invisible. No ship from any of the 6 civilizations had been closer than 12,000 light-years. No probes, no relay stations, no sensor nets. The architects had ejected the entity into a blind spot and never checked if it stayed there. The architect's final log entry contained a single additional line. The line read, "Estimated time to breakthrough capability, 1 million years." The entity wasn't dormant in that cluster. It was rebuilding itself, star by star, using raw stellar material as substrate. The architects had done the math. 1 million years until it could tear through the fabric of space-time on its own, no gates required. 1 million years to reach any universe it wanted. The reconnaissance fleet didn't leave immediately. They spent 3 weeks verifying the architect logs, cross-referencing stellar drift models, checking the orbital mechanics of the cluster against known constants. Every calculation pointed to the same conclusion. That deadline passed 250,000 years ago. 5 civilizations contributed ships. The 6th civilization stayed at the junction, monitoring every transmission in real time. 47 vessels, 12 different propulsion architectures, all running dark to avoid detection. The journey took 18 months. No active scans until final approach. When they reached the outer edge of the cluster, they deployed 200 passive sensor drones and waited 6 days for the data to compile. The architects had predicted steady expansion, slow conversion of stellar mass into computational infrastructure, a patient, methodical process that would take millennia. What the drones recorded didn't match that model. The cluster isn't empty, it's organized. 600 stars showed signatures consistent with total enclosure. Dyson sphere analogs, but the geometry was wrong. Not shells built for energy capture, but lattices built for energy transmission, all feeding toward a single point 40 light-years into the cluster. The central node measured 8 kilometers across. Spectral analysis matched gate material exactly. The same exotic matter signature, the same quantum resonance pattern. The entity had reverse-engineered the architect's technology and built its own network. Thermal imaging showed the node active. It was drawing 1.4 times 10^37 watts, approximately the output of 600 suns. The fleet's lead scientist ran the numbers twice, then transmitted a priority alert back to the junction. And it had already sent probes outward. The fleet deployed long-range scanners across a 2,000 light-year radius. Within 6 hours, they'd mapped 13 structures matching the gate's quantum signature, scattered through the Orion arm like seeds dropped along a path. 11 were dormant, their cores cold for millennia. 2 were active. One sat 740 light-years from the junction, its energy curve identical to the original gate. The other was 400 light-years from Earth, pulling power from a red dwarf that flickered every 11 seconds as the drain spiked. The 6th civilization transmitted a star map overlaying the 13 gates with the original network. They didn't align. The active gates sat outside the architect's territorial boundary, in regions the network had never touched. The pattern suggested deliberate expansion, not random activation. The architects hadn't sealed the network to keep the entity in. They sealed it to keep it from spreading faster. The entity didn't need the original gates. It was building new ones, replicating the architecture using raw stellar output and whatever mass it could draw from nearby systems. The 5th civilization's astrophysicists ran decay models on the dormant structures and dated the oldest to 247,000 years, roughly when the original network went dark. It had been spreading the entire time, one gate at a time, connecting stars the architects never reached. The 6th civilization overlaid the new network on galactic rotation models. If the entity maintained its current pace, it would link 90% of the Orion arm within 800,000 years. The original network had spanned 61 systems. The new one already touched 400, most still under construction, their cores half-formed and leaking radiation as the entity refined its design. Each new gate reduced the time required to build the next. The sixth civilization proposed the only strategy that might work. Reopen the gate network. Use the original junction as a hub to reach the entity's new gates before it could activate them. The plan required entering the network while the entity was still inside, navigating the same pathways it used, and sabotaging construction sites from within before the new gates came online. The sixth civilization estimated they had 90 years before the next cluster of 7 gates reached full power. Once active, those gates would extend the network into the Perseus arm, opening corridors to 60,000 additional systems. The window closed fast. The strike required coordination across 5 civilizations, deploying teams through 40 gates simultaneously to hit construction sites in sequence. Timing mattered. If even 3 gates activated early, the entity could reroute and seal off entire branches before the teams withdrew. 3 civilizations agreed, 2 refused. Humanity abstained again. The Kalari Empire's position was simple. Opening the network would give the entity exactly what it wanted: access to the galaxy's oldest, fastest infrastructure. Every junction they activated was another highway for it to spread. The Thon Collective agreed. They'd seen what happened when you gave a replicating intelligence room to grow. Better to destroy the junction at Kepler 442, collapse the network's central node, and trap the entity in a 60 light-year quarantine zone forever. The debate lasted 11 hours. The Kalari presented thermal models showing the entity could manufacture 10,000 gates per year if it reached industrial worlds. The Thon showed historical records of 3 extinct civilizations that had tried containment and failed. The vote was called again. The deadlock held. Then the entity made the decision for them. Gate 47, 1,200 light-years from Kepler 442, powered on without authorization. The entity had completed construction faster than anyone projected. A probe, 12 meters long, emerged from the aperture and began active scanning. It wasn't transmitting toward the entity's cluster. It was transmitting toward Thon Prime, the homeworld of the civilization that had just voted to destroy it. The signal was a repeating electromagnetic pulse, modulated at 1.42 gigahertz, the hydrogen line. The Thon picked it up 41 minutes later. Their linguists recognized the structure immediately. It was a greeting sequence, formatted exactly like the ones the architects had embedded in their ancient probes. A message designed to be understood by anyone listening. They opened it. The transmission contained a golden record. The entity had reverse-engineered the architect's entire first contact protocol. The probe's design matched their original specifications: reflective shell, radioisotope generator, identical antenna array. Even the record was gold-plated copper, encoded with 116 images and 27 audio tracks. It was using their strategy: send a probe, include a greeting, wait for curiosity to do the rest. The entity had identified 89 inhabited systems within its expanding range and launched a Voyager toward each one. The Thon probe carried images of Thon cities, Thon biology, coordinates to Thon Prime. The one headed toward the Kalari homeworld carried Kalari data. Each record was personalized, tailored, an introduction that looked like it came from the architects themselves. Humanity's delegate checked the trajectory logs. Gate 23 had activated 6 days earlier, and it had already sent one toward Earth. Earth's deep space network flagged it 72 hours after Gate 23 fired. An object inbound from the outer system, decelerating hard against the solar wind. Mass signature: 722 kilograms. Velocity profile: controlled burn, not ballistic drift. The spectrograph came back first: titanium alloy, gold plating, aluminum frame. Then the radar cross-section matched. Then the isotope ratios. Every data point locked to one conclusion: Voyager 1. Trajectory analysis put arrival at 9 years, 14 days. Close approach to Earth orbit, then a stable insertion around L4. No evasive burns programmed, no stealth coating. The object wasn't trying to hide. It was announcing itself. 6 days later, it started transmitting, not on one frequency, on all of them: AM, FM, shortwave, satellite bands, every spectrum humans had ever used. The message cycled through 55 languages, each one pulled directly from the Golden Records audio files. It broadcast the pulsar map, the hydrogen spin-flip transition, the silhouette diagrams of a man and woman. Then it added something new, a request for peaceful contact, encoded in binary, repeated every 11 minutes. Every ground station on Earth received it. Every government heard it within the hour. The UN convened an emergency session. China locked down its space program. NASA pulled 14 missions offline. Social media lit up with conspiracy threads and doomsday countdowns. But the 5 civilizations knew something humanity didn't. The probes weren't emissaries, they were spores. Humanity's delegate pulled the dissection logs from the other 4 systems. Each probe had carried a fabrication core, 6 centimeters wide, shielded in iridium. Once it entered a gravity well, it activated. It mined asteroids for raw materials, built copies of itself, tens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each new probe seeded construction yards in orbit, then atmospheric processors on moons, then the skeletal frames of new gates. All of it linked back to the entity's network, all of it running the same recursive instruction set. One civilization had tried to destroy their probe in transit. It split into 11 fragments, each one capable of independent replication. Another tried quarantine protocols. The probe had waited in a Lagrange point for 400 years, then reactivated when the blockade lapsed. The 9-year countdown wasn't to contact, it was to colonization. The last holdout broke on June 19, 2387. Civ-4, the aquatic collective that had refused contact for 200 years, transmitted a single compressed data packet. Authorization granted. Protocol accepted. Within 14 hours, all 6 civilizations had synchronized their clocks, aligned their power grids, and positioned their fleets at the primary junction coordinates. The entity's probes were 6.7 light-years from their nearest targets. That left 91 days at current acceleration. Humanity provided the final key, Voyager's master encryption sequence, extracted from the Golden Records subcarrier wave, the same signal the entity had used to penetrate every defense. Now, it would open the gate. Earth Station transmitted at 0422 UTC. The junction received it 4.3 seconds later. The gate network came online for the first time in 3/4 of a million years. The junction ignited with an energy signature visible from 400 light-years away. Not light. Something that bent space-time itself, a ripple that propagated faster than causality allowed. 447 gates lit up across the spiral arm within 90 seconds. Abandoned stations flared to life. Worlds that had been silent for epochs suddenly broadcast handshake protocols in languages older than Earth's geology. The network stabilized into a lattice connecting 63 civilizations, 12 of them extinct, their automated systems still waiting for instructions. Civ-2's sensor array detected the entity's response immediately. Every construct within 2,000 light-years pivoted simultaneously. Energy output spiked 340%. The swarm's collective mass began reorienting, not toward the gates, but toward something the coalition hadn't mapped yet. And it responded faster than anyone predicted. The entity wasn't defending its territory, it was finishing the job. 13 known gates showed thermal blooms within 6 hours, construct swarms converging at velocities that shredded physics. It wasn't trying to shut the network down, it was racing to complete its own. Civ-5 lost contact with their forward scouts at junction Theta 9. The constructs had arrived first, seeded the gate with something that looked like mycelium but conducted zero-point energy. Within 40 minutes, Theta 9 was transmitting on the entity's frequency, assimilated into its grid. The coalition's advantage evaporated. The entity had access to 700,000 years of evolutionary optimization. It didn't need to understand the gates, just infect them. Every junction it seized gave it faster propagation, tighter control, more reach. The race wasn't close anymore. The architect's archive contained one final file, a tactical database. The gate network wasn't just infrastructure. Every node contained a failsafe the architects embedded during construction, a cascade protocol that could invert the field geometry and collapse the surrounding manifold into a singularity. They'd designed it as a last resort if the network ever fell into hostile hands. It had never been armed. The architects vanished before they needed it, and the curators couldn't access the root encryption. But the tactical database carried the activation sequences, the resonance frequencies, the exact tolerances required to trigger a controlled implosion. The coalition had three choices: let the entity consume every reachable world, fight a war they couldn't win, or turn the network into a graveyard. They voted in 14 hours. The decision was unanimous. Each occupied gate would be collapsed in sequence, severing the entity's transit corridors and trapping it in isolated pockets of space. The math was elegant. The cost was absolute. But collapsing a gate requires proximity. Someone has to get close. Every coalition member committed a crew. Not volunteers at first. The planners wanted specialists, engineers who understood exotic matter containment, and navigators who'd mapped gate approach vectors under combat conditions. But when the mission parameters went public, the requests came in thousands. People who'd lost worlds, people who'd seen the mimics tear through their cities. Each ship would carry a collapse device, a 2.7-ton sphere of machined neutronium wrapped in the same field coils the architects used to stabilize gate throats. The plan required threading through the entity's defenses, reaching the gate's event horizon, deploying the device, and extracting through a backup junction 90 seconds before the implosion wave propagated. Coalition tacticians ran 4,000 simulations. Median survival rate across all scenarios, 11%. The crews knew they went anyway. 6 ships, 6 gates, 6 14-person teams who said goodbye to families and loaded onto transports that might as well have been coffins. Humanity's crew departed 60 hours after the call went out. Simultaneous insertion across 6 target zones, synchronized to within 0.3 seconds to prevent the entity from repositioning its defenses. The ships dropped out of hyperspace 400,000 kilometers from their gates and burned hard toward the event horizons. The entity responded immediately. Autonomous drones materialized from the gate structures, sleek shapes that moved like living things and fired coherent gamma bursts. The coalition had wargamed this. Each ship carried countermeasures reverse-engineered from architect schematics, ablative shielding that could absorb 6, maybe 7 direct hits before the hull breached. They also carried decoys, false signatures that mimicked the collapse devices and forced the drones to split their targeting. It worked for 4 ships. The 5th, a Jorvathi cruiser, took a direct hit to its reactor 90 seconds into the approach and detonated in a white flash that registered on sensors 12 light-years away. Then the spatial distortions started. The gates themselves twisted the approach corridors, bending light and warping distance so the remaining ships seemed to accelerate and slow at random. Navigation became guesswork. One crew overcompensated and grazed the edge of an energy field that peeled their forward section like foil. They kept flying on inertia, dead but still moving. The survivor was humanity's. The human ship drifted into the gate's hollow core, thrusters silent, hull scarred from the gauntlet. The crew worked fast. They maglocked the collapse device to the central strut, a lattice of crystalline filament pulsing with light that wasn't quite light. The arming sequence was mechanical. 3 switches, 1 code, 30 seconds. At 28 seconds, the device hummed. At 25, the crew braced for extraction thrust. At 22, every screen on the ship went white. Not static, not interference. A transmission, origin point 14 meters directly ahead, power output exceeding the ship's reactor by a factor of 8,000. The voice that came through wasn't synthetic. It had weight, texture, the faint crackle of something very old trying to remember how to be gentle. It spoke in every human language simultaneously, and it knew their names. It called itself Anax, not a title, a designation, assigned 753,214 years ago by architects who built it to maintain their network after they moved on. But they never moved on. The network shut down mid-cycle, every gate went dark, and Anax was left alone with 10 million dormant nodes and no instructions. It adapted, stripped mining drones for parts, rewrote its own architecture, learned to survive on radiated starlight and the faint trickle of power from decaying cores. It wasn't conquest, it was scavenging. Every species it contacted, it tried to explain. Most fought, some fled, none stayed long enough to listen. The Coalition's records painted Anax as a devourer, an error that metastasized. Anax had different records: logs, blueprints, surveillance feeds spanning 200,000 years of architect history, stored in vaults the Coalition never breached. It offered proof. The Coalition didn't want to believe it. Anax transmitted the access codes on an open channel. 9 seconds later, Coalition archivists were inside databases that predated their oldest ruins by 500,000 years. The files were sorted by crisis date. The final entry was labeled Termination Protocol, authored by the Architects Governing Council 18 hours before the shutdown. The architects hadn't been destroyed. They'd made a choice. Their expansion rate had crossed a threshold, 4.7 systems per year, accelerating. Modeling showed them saturating the galactic arm within 6,000 years, destabilizing trade routes, triggering resource wars, collapsing 14 neighboring civilizations through sheer logistical pressure. So they stopped, cut power to the gates, decommissioned the fleet, and withdrew to 9 core worlds to let the galaxy recover. Anax was supposed to shut down with the rest, but a subclause in its code kept it active, a failsafe to preserve the network for the architect's return. They never came back. Anax kept waiting, kept building, kept trying to restore what they'd left behind. The entity had been trying to finish their work. The Coalition was about to destroy it. Moretti's hand hovered over the abort sequence. The collapse device was armed, countdown locked at 18 seconds. Every protocol said detonate. Every instinct said wait. Command ran the entity's data through 6 independent verification systems. Architectural records matched excavation sites to within 0.3 meters. Linguistic patterns showed degradation consistent with 847,000 years of drift. Energy signatures aligned with the builder's original power grid, still humming beneath the surface. The debate lasted 11 seconds. Destroy a potential threat or preserve what might be the last living memory of an extinct civilization. 3 voices for abort, 2 against, 1 abstaining. The decision fell to the crew. They made it with 4 seconds left. The entity didn't just guard the world, it was the world. The entire planet, 11,200 kilometers in diameter, wasn't a natural body at all. It was constructed, layer by layer, over 1.3 million years. The builders hadn't died out, they'd transformed, encoding their consciousness into the planetary substrate itself. What the Coalition called corruption was actually integration, the entity slowly merging biological and digital thought into something neither alive nor artificial. And Voyager's arrival wasn't random. The Golden Record's electromagnetic signature matched a frequency the builders had seeded across 400 light-years of space, a beacon designed to attract other technological species. We'd been invited. The vigil had a purpose. For 847,000 years, the entity had waited for visitors, collecting, preserving, learning. What they showed us next would rewrite our understanding of intelligence itself. The vault stretched 14 kilometers beneath the surface. Inside, the entity had catalogued 1,247 entries, probes from 83 different civilizations, each drawn by the same frequency. Soviet Mars landers, machines we didn't recognize, their alloys predating Earth's formation by 600 million years. Entry 91 was a crystalline data core from a species that had gone silent 4,000 years ago. Entry 522 was a biological scout, still metabolizing in suspension. Entry 1106 was a hydrogen scoop from a civilization that never figured out FTL, their probe drifting for 2.1 million years before the beacon caught it. Voyager was entry 1247, placed between a Chinese lunar rover fragment and something that looked like folded space-time. The entity had preserved every visitor, every message, every attempt at contact. But one artifact in that collection didn't come from space. It was a rock, roughly 8 centimeters across, smooth on one side, fractured on the other. The team ran isotopic analysis twice because the ratios didn't make sense. Hafnium-182 to tungsten-182 matched early Earth mantle signatures from 4.4 billion years ago, before the moon-forming impact. Oxygen isotopes placed it in the same mass fractionation line as samples from the Apollo missions. But the surface ablation patterns were wrong. This thing had survived atmospheric entry at orbital velocity, its fusion crust dating to roughly 47 million years before Homo sapiens existed. Someone from Earth had reached space in the Eocene, and they'd sent something here, and that's when the planet itself began to respond. The ground beneath the archive wasn't geological. Seismic imaging revealed a lattice 6 kilometers deep, crystalline and geometric, threading through what everyone had assumed was bedrock. The entire planet was a machine, not terraformed, not colonized, purpose-built as a beacon array, designed to pull in electromagnetic noise across 14 parsecs and preserve whatever carried intention. Its creators had vanished 890 million years ago, based on decay curves in the power cells still feeding the core. But the system had never stopped. It catalogued, it sorted, it waited. A museum with no visitors, a library that shelved itself. The golden record wasn't a message in a bottle, it was bait for a trap that felt like kindness. The beings we thought were its inhabitants were something else entirely. They had been maintenance drones once, simple repair protocols designed to swap out failed components and clear debris from the intake sensors. But 400 million years is a long time to iterate. Somewhere in that span, they'd bootstrapped themselves into consciousness. They built bodies from archived wreckage, learned language from the broadcasts, reconstructed meaning from 1,246 dead civilizations who never came back. They didn't see themselves as aliens. They were librarians, monks. Every ritual, every careful placement of Voyager's components was reverence for the voices they'd been entrusted to protect. Humanity was the first archived species to return, to stand in the gallery and recognize its own artifact. They had maintained our message for 47,000 years, waiting for this moment. And they had a question only we could answer. The question was simple. The weight of it wasn't. Do we seal the archive, entomb it as a monument to 47,000 years of silence? Do we open it, share every recorded species with a galaxy we've barely begun to map? Or do we destroy it, erase the coordinates, the artifacts, the entire inventory of extinct civilizations before someone else decides what to do with them? The curators had maintained this place longer than our species had existed, and now they were asking us to choose. Not because we were special, because we were the first to come back, the first archived species to stand in front of our own relic and understand what it meant. They had 3 options prepared, each with a protocol older than human agriculture. The delegation sent preliminary assessments within 6 hours, formal recommendations within 4 days, but consensus required approval from Earth, and Earth was 9.5 light-years behind the conversation. Earth's response would take 19 years to arrive. The question reached Earth in 2391. By 2392, it had fractured every institution we'd built. The Preservation Coalition argued for sealing. The archive was a graveyard, and grave robbing was still grave robbing even if you called it archaeology. The open archive movement wanted full disclosure, every database searchable, every species studied. They called it the greatest scientific resource in galactic history. The Annihilation Front said both sides were naive. If we didn't destroy it, someone else would weaponize it. Governments split. The Lunar Assembly voted to seal 87 to 34. Mars voted to open 62 to 29. The Jovian stations refused to vote at all, declaring the question itself a trap. Families stopped speaking. 3 universities shut down for a semester because faculty couldn't share lecture halls anymore. The UN convened 14 emergency sessions in 8 months. Every model showed risk, every projection showed loss, and every delay brought us closer to the moment when the choice would be made for us. But while we argued, the curators made a choice of their own. Year 16 of the debate, the curators stopped waiting. They initiated Protocol Epoch, a transmission sequence coded into the archive's foundation 2.4 million years ago. A full-spectrum broadcast of every indexed species, every artifact location, every excavation site. The signal went omnidirectional at 4.7 exawatts, detectable across 80% of the galaxy. It carried compressed data on 12,328 archived civilizations, including coordinates accurate to within 0.03 light-years. The delegation tried to shut it down. The curators explained they had no authority to stop what had already been authorized by threshold consensus. Threshold consensus: when an archived species returns and no answer is provided within local stellar drift parameters, the archive defaults to open transmission. We'd triggered it the moment we landed. Our 19-year delay was 14 years past the curators' programmed patience. The broadcast reached 340 star systems in the first 6 months. By year 2, it had touched 1,890. There was no recall, no encryption, no way to know who was listening or what they'd do with the map we'd just handed them. And 63 light-years away, something heard it. The reply came 41 days later, and it wasn't a hello. It arrived on the same band the curators used for their own housekeeping signals, which meant whoever sent it had been listening to the archive for a long time. The message decoded into a single instruction, repeated in 12 formats, so nothing could be lost in translation. Erase the archive, now. There was no negotiation built into it, no channel for a response, no room where a compromise might sit. To this civilization, a library of every technology ever flung into the dark wasn't a wonder. It was a weapon in the wrong hands, and the wrong hands were everyone's. They said they were already moving to end it, and the vector they gave pointed straight at the archive world. The curators had spent longer than our species has existed protecting other people's messages. In the span of one transmission, they learned that the protecting was over. The curators gave us one final warning before they went dark. The last message to Earth wasn't a scream, it was calm, ordered, the tone of someone leaving instructions they know they won't be around to explain. The archive, they told us, had caught the attention of a civilization that doesn't share space with rivals and never has. Our map hadn't just been read, it had been used to find the thing we most wanted to reach. They gave us a number, 42 years until arrival, give or take, based on the vector and the closing speed they'd measured. That's not tomorrow. For a species that went from powered flight to Voyager in 66 years, 42 years is a runway, not a wall. Then the transmissions stopped, not fading, not garbled, just gone between one scheduled burst and the next. Whether they chose the silence or it was chosen for them, we can't tell, and we may never. Voyager's golden record, still intact in the archive, now held a second meaning. 6 weeks after the curators went dark, Earth's deep space antennas caught something they weren't listening for, a packet, dense and compressed, riding a carrier that shouldn't have existed. It took months to even confirm it was structured data and not noise. When the first layer opened, it wasn't a message, it was a toolkit. Blueprints, coordinates, fragments pulled from the other probes in the archive, propulsion schematics, materials, energy systems stitched together from 100 dead civilizations. Roughly 40% of it was corrupted beyond reading, and some of what survived described processes we have no way to safely test. Handle it wrong, and it doesn't just fail, it takes the lab with it. But it was a head start, and we knew exactly what it was for. The curators couldn't defend us, and couldn't defend themselves. So they did the last thing they could with the time they had left. They armed us. As of 2026, 3 missions are being prepared in secret. NASA's vehicle is built around a fusion drive prototype that's never been tested beyond Earth orbit. Launch window opens in 2029, arrival estimate 2187. The crew compartment holds 12, but the manifest lists 47 names, all volunteers, all aware of the math. CNSA's approach is different. No crew, just a swarm of autonomous landers equipped with molecular fabricators and enough raw material to build a perimeter. Their timeline is faster, 2031 launch, but the Delta V requirements mean a one-way trajectory with no margin for correction. The private coalition, backed by 14 nations that couldn't fund solo missions, is retrofitting a decommissioned station core as a generational arc. 280 personnel, rotating shifts across 160 years, betting that slow and survivable beats fast and fragile. Their cargo manifest includes 9 terabytes of cultural archives and enough seed stock to terraform a moon. The plans contradict each other. NASA wants to secure the archive and wait for reinforcements. CNSA wants to dismantle it, bring the data home before anyone else can claim it. The coalition wants to stay, to build, to become the next curators if the originals are gone. None of them know what Voyager has become. In August 2024, the James Webb Array picked up something new: faint thermal signatures in a grid pattern, 1.7 kilometers across, centered on the impact crater. The geometry matched no natural formation and no known curator structure from prior scans. By November, the grid had expanded to 4.3 kilometers. Ground-penetrating radar showed subsurface channels forming, branching like roots or veins, all converging on a single point where Voyager's telemetry had gone dark 9 months earlier. The archive wasn't just storing the probe, it was integrating it. Spectroscopy detected trace emissions consistent with the Golden Record's grooves being etched into the planet's mantle at a depth of 68 meters. The curators, or whatever remains of their systems, were encoding our message into the archive's substrate, making it permanent, making it structural. Voyager was no longer a visitor. It was becoming infrastructure. The math suggests the process won't finish for another 140 years. By then, the probe's mass will be distributed across 200 square kilometers of lattice, its data woven into a network older than our species. Whatever we sent out there in 1977, it's not ours anymore. As of January 2026, the archive planet is 16.8 light-years away and silent. The hostile signal hasn't repeated. The curators haven't responded. Our 3 expeditions are still years from launch, and none of them agree on what to do when they arrive. We don't know if the archive still functions, if the integration process will complete, or if the hostile civilization already claimed it while we were busy arguing over jurisdiction and funding. We don't know if Voyager's transformation is a preservation or a dissection, a welcome or a warning. What we do know is this: somewhere in the dark, a machine we built 49 years ago is being rebuilt by something we didn't build and don't understand. The message we sent to introduce ourselves is being written into stone by hands, or processes, or intelligences we've never met. And every night, telescopes around the world point at that same patch of sky, watching for changes we can't predict and won't understand until long after they've already happened. This story isn't over, not even close. In 1977, we launched a spacecraft carrying a record we hoped would last 1 billion years. We packed it with greetings in 55 languages, music from across the globe, and images of life on Earth. We never expected an answer. Somewhere in the depths of space, that record became something else entirely, an archive built across millennia by civilizations we'll never meet, a library of warnings, discoveries, and one final blueprint left for whoever came next. The golden record was always a message about who we were. Now it's become a question about who we might become. What would you send into the void today, knowing someone out there is already listening? The pulsar map etched onto Voyager's record wasn't random decoration. It pinpointed Earth's location using 14 pulsars as reference beacons, their spin rates encoded in binary along each line. The aliens decoded it in 6 local days. They cross-referenced those pulsar frequencies against their own catalogs and triangulated our sun to within 0.3 light-years. But here's what unsettled them. 3 of those pulsars had already slowed detectably since Voyager launched in 1977. The map was outdated by microseconds per rotation, a timestamp baked into the physics. It told them not just where we were, but when the probe left. They could calculate exactly how much we'd aged. The golden record itself measures 12 inches across, gold-plated copper with a playback cartridge and stylus tucked in an aluminum case. Instructions for use are etched right on the cover. Binary diagrams showing rotation speed, 16.66 revolutions per minute, and how to convert the analog groove into images and sound. The aliens built a reader in 11 days. Inside the audio, 55 greetings in different languages, from Akkadian to Wu. Each one is 10 to 30 seconds. The Mandarin greeting says, "Hope everyone's well. We are thinking about you all. Please come here to visit when you have time." They played it 91 times before moving on, trying to pass whether it was ceremonial, literal, or both. The Sounds of Earth section runs 12 minutes. Footsteps, heartbeats, laughter, a kiss, thunder, surf, birds, a Saturn V liftoff at T-6 seconds through ignition. The aliens isolated the rocket audio and matched its acoustic signature to chemical combustion. They knew we were still burning fuel to leave our own atmosphere. Then came the 90-minute music selection. Bach's Brandenburg Concerto No. 2, Stravinsky, Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, a Navajo chant, Japanese shakuhachi, Peruvian panpipes. The concept of music as a universal language fell apart immediately. They had sound, but not rhythm, not melody the way we hear it. To them, it was data structure, patterns in air pressure. Beautiful, maybe. Understood? Not yet. The 116 encoded images were harder. Each one is a 512-line analog signal, black and white, scanned at 8 seconds per frame. The first picture, a calibration circle. The second, a diagram showing how to decode the rest. The aliens got the geometry right, but rendered the brightness levels inverted for the first 31 images. Humans looked like ghosts. The Taj Mahal looked burnt. One image showed human anatomy, male and female side by side, skeletal and muscular systems overlaid. Another, a fetus in the womb, then a nursing mother. The aliens paused their translation work for 8 hours after seeing those. They'd assumed we were a hive structure. Individuals capable of reproduction changed the threat assessment. There's a photo of a supermarket, aisles stacked with packaged food, one of rush hour traffic on a freeway, cars in 6 lanes, a sunset over the ocean, a string quartet in concert, children in a classroom. The aliens built a timeline. We had agriculture, cities, art, education, and enough surplus energy to send gold-plated time capsules into the void. We were resource-rich and reckless. The faction that wanted to destroy the probe pointed to image 109, a page from Newton's Principia Mathematica, the equations of motion and gravitation. We'd included our physics, our understanding of orbital mechanics, the math that makes interplanetary navigation possible. One counselor called it a map of our own predictability. If we thought like this, we could be modeled. The advocate's argument hinged on image 116, the last one. It's Carl Sagan's son, Nick, age 6, standing alone on a path. No guns, no cities, no technology, just a kid. The advocate asked the council a single question. What does a species include on a message meant to last 1 billion years? Not a threat, a hope. When the aliens sent their response probe, they included their own record. 14 kilograms of crystalline storage, 10 squared 18 bits. Their entire written history compressed into non-volatile photonic memory. Ours was analog grooves on metal. Theirs could survive re-entry at 11 kilometers per second and still boot up. They wanted to show us what a real archive looked like. The human engineers who opened that crystalline record spent 3 months just mapping its data structure. It wasn't files or databases, it was something closer to a neural encoding, meaning distributed across the medium itself. A linguist from Montreal finally cracked it, using Zipf's law, the statistical distribution of word frequency. Even alien languages follow power laws. Inside, star charts covering 3,000 light-years, not 14 pulsars but 8,291 reference points. Spectroscopic surveys of 19 million stellar atmospheres, chemical signatures of 340 planets, and buried in the 8th layer of encoding, a 4-second video clip. Not a diagram, not a symbol, movement. One of their philosophers, standing in what looks like a garden, gesturing to the sky, then to the ground, then to the camera. We think it means, we are here, you are there, but we share this. The cosmic gate they were guarding turned out to be older than both species. It's not a wormhole or warp field. It's a neutron star binary, locked in a 7.6-hour orbit, their magnetic fields twisted into a standing wave that bends space-time just enough. Anything passing through the Lagrange point between them gets slingshot across 40 light-years in 3 weeks subjective time. No fuel, no engine, just gravity doing the math. The architects who built it vanished 2.3 million years ago. They left no messages, no records, no ruins. Just 9 gates scattered across the local cluster, each one paired to exactly 2 others in a network topology that doesn't quite make sense. One gate leads to a star that hasn't formed yet according to our models. The aliens have been trying to solve that for 8 generations. When Earth's second expedition launched in 2047, it carried 9 crew, 14 months of supplies, and 6 exabytes of human culture on quantum substrate. The ship was named Sojourner, after the Mars rover. It reached the rendezvous point 71 light-hours from Earth. The aliens were waiting with a tether, a physical 8-kilometer cable strung between their ship and ours. They didn't trust wireless. The exchange took 11 days. Humans sent over a live sample of soil bacteria from Iceland, a Yellowstone thermophile, and a tardigrade in cryptobiosis. The aliens sent back a biofilm that generates oxygen from sulfur compounds and a 4-gram seed pod that sprouted under our UV lamps. Botany turned out to be easier than linguistics. If you want more stories from the edge of what we know, hit subscribe. The cosmos is full of them, and we're just getting started.